Good evening, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our 2025 State of the Market. I can't believe we're already here.
It's been an eventful year, and we made a lot of predictions. About 1 year ago, we're going to see how we do and make some interesting predictions for this coming year. This is always one of the kind of favorite pieces of content that we do each year, and we've got a few items about halfway through and kind of towards the end that I think this is going to be interesting new stuff for you to hear, and we hope that this prepares you for this coming year.
Yeah, the things that we have to share kind of there halfway through or so are certainly the things that Nick and I have been talking about over the last several months and just trying to understand the market and how it is that the market came to be in the situation that it's in and where it's going over the next couple of years, and looking at financial statistics and behavioral economics. That's certainly like my favorite part as a psychiatrist, is understanding the psychology behind money and markets and economics and politics and all of those things that go into the housing market. I know I say it every year, especially for someone that like plans so much. You think I would appreciate the movement of time. And yet every year I'm like, man, here we are again. Like it was just last December that we were doing our state of the market, and here we are already in December of 2025. I'm sure many of you feel that way as well. As we all get older, each year is a smaller percentage of our overall life, right? I look at our baby Elijah and I'm like, from December to December was most of his life. He's only 14 months old, but for those of us in 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond, each year is just a smaller and smaller sliver of life. And this is really the time that we do a lot of our reflection and visioning and planning in our personal lives. We just ran our visioning workshops the week before Thanksgiving. We're making plans for ourselves, our children, our companies, and really thinking about, what are the moves that we're going to make in 2026. And I'll tell you guys a little kind of behind the scenes story. So bless his heart, Nick does most of our slide preparation for State of the Market, and he was working on it quite a bit over the weekend. And, at some point I'm like, okay, let's go. Like, we have a wonderful team that helps us with, making sure the slides look polished and beautiful and everything. Nick puts the content on there. And I'm like, yep, get it over to our content team. We're great. And then, kind of upping the ante, right? That's one of the pros and cons, I suppose, right? Of living and working with your spouse. Okay, Nick, okay, how much longer? Are we talking an hour, 40 minutes, 15 minutes?
I've probably spent a good 20 hours on this slide
I know. Because I was watching all 5 children the whole time.
Yep.
And at one point it was, 10 o'clock at night or something it was either Friday or Saturday. Kids were asleep and Nick was working on the slides again. And I said, tell me about the slides. Like, what is it that has you so engrossed in the slides? How much longer do you think you'll have? And you'll hear throughout our presentation kind of the thesis of there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. And what is shown in the statistics and what is felt behaviorally is quite different. And so Nick said to me, I'm really meditating on, what I really believe the state of the market is and how I'm going to lead our company and our dollars and our investor dollars in 2026. So I'm getting a lot of value out of combing through all of this data and looking through it and creating the thesis. Whether or not we do it for a presentation is unrelated to the data that I'm synthesizing. I thought that was really useful to hear you say that, and just appreciate how much time you've put into. I know you're doing this all day, every day, living in the market, but in the last couple of weeks as you've put this presentation together.
Absolutely.
So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome. We see lots of names that we recognize, old friends and new. Excited to be together tonight, and let's jump in and get started with our presentation. So this is our December 2025 State of the Market. Our usual disclaimer, you can think of tonight as an educational, informational event. Both Nick and I and Black Swan Real Estate, we do not give investing advice. We encourage you to speak with your trusted advisors like your attorneys, your CPAs, whoever's important to you as you're making any financial decisions. This is not a solicitation to sell securities. We might mention things like how our funds are performing or projections we have for our funds, but you can think of this as just simply a state of the market. No forward-looking statements are ever guaranteed. All real estate investing does have risk, including potential loss of capital. And if you were to consider making an investment with Black Swan Real Estate, you need to be an accredited investor and then fully review all of those materials, such as the PPM, the operating agreement. You can find all of that at securefreedomfund.com. Tonight is our time to be together and share some insights about state of the market. As always, we start with the end in mind.
Yeah. So it's easy to listen to information and go see what the latest economist has to say on CNN, but there's a lot of noise out there. Is this information relevant? Does this information help me lead a more successful, happier life? Does this enrich my soul in any way? Does this enrich my bank account? And we're trying to give you some really intense, some really dense information, and we're trying to give you only the information that is relevant to your life. How are you going to survive and thrive and grow and build in the state of the market where it is today? And we believe that you can only take bold, decisive, massive action from a place of absolute certainty. And so that's what we want to give you is kind of our lens through which we see the world, the way we process that signal and kind of cut away the noise. We really actually consume very little information out there. And we're going to talk about where the U.S. economy is today. There's just a few variables you really need to consider when looking at the U.S. economy, where the single family market is, the multifamily market, what we're going to do. So forget what we say. What are we going to do? What is our company doing? And ultimately, what do you need to do to survive and thrive in the market today, in the current state of the market?
We've been doing State of the Markets now for several years and finally have put those all in one location because we are big believers in anything that you do in life, any journaling, any predictions, plans that you make. You should always be comparing what happens in reality to what you wrote down, right? That's how you hone your sense-making device, right? Your decision-making algorithm. Kind of going back to visioning, people will say, like, how are you so good at visioning? And first of all, I believe that's a skill that's available to all humans, and that's why I love teaching it so much. But really, it's about writing things down and then going back in the future and checking, where were you right? Where did you miss the mark? Examining why both of those things are true, right? Looking at the strengths, looking at where there might have been gaps in the analysis or events happened that you didn't quite predict. And so we put all of that together at blackswanteam.com/market. You'll see all of our state of the markets over the last several years are all there in one convenient location. So you can take a look there, send friends there who may be interested in improving their real estate knowledge and kind of getting I think of this as like a mini MBA all at once of what have things been like over the last couple of years, and then where are we going? So you kind of get that full story. So blackswanteam.com/market.
You may not believe we're about to kind of check how did we do on our predictions last year versus how did 2025 turn out, and I'll kind of maybe give it away here. Most of our predictions were spot on. Nearly 100% of our predictions were spot on. And that's given us a huge edge. We're not, geniuses or anything like that. We're just incredibly specific about the things that we pay attention to and the predictions that we make, conservative in those predictions, and specific, making sure we're making predictions about things that are only predictions that are relevant to our business and that equip us to make better business decisions. Our company, Black Swan Real Estate, is doing extraordinarily well compared to the greater industry right now. It's been the toughest time in the multifamily industry in about half a century. You'd have to go back to the 70s and 80s before you'd see times this tough. Lots of operators have had capital calls or just had outright capital loss. And if you went back and watched our State of the Market talks from, for example, December 2021, Elaine called the pandemic. She said, here's exactly what's going to happen in December of 2021. And we were, fortunately, with her kind of research and visionary efforts, able to stay a step ahead. Our company, we got long-term fixed rate debt. And so if you go back to, that webinar, we said, yep, now is a great time to get long-term fixed rate debt because the pandemic's going to go away and interest rates are going to skyrocket as a result. So we have, all full recourse debt. We have incredible liquid reserves. We control costs and control our assets with vertical integration. I think I agreed to buy another $100,000 plow rig today. It's been a very snowy winter here in Minnesota, but we save 90% of our costs with that. Yeah.
This is a true story. So Nick is fanatical about controlling costs, which sometimes like infuriates me. And then other times I'm like, yep, like this is the discipline that it takes to build a $1 billion company. And as soon as you start not caring about cost is when things go off the rails. So there's someone on our team, Brian. He's amazing. Very like
he's sitting right next to us right now.
He's sitting right next to us listening, very data driven. And he went through all of the credit card statements and then sent individual emails to people saying like, hey, I see you have this subscription and that subscription. Are you using this? And a lot of it was, older stuff that I hadn't used in a while and was able to cut out a lot of things. And I said, I'll cut out my subscription for YouTube Premium. And then I came into the office today. I'm like 3 days into no subscription to YouTube Premium. That's how I listen to music. I use it, basically like Spotify. And I said, Nick, I think I listened to like 20 minutes of commercials today. I think I'm going to get my YouTube Premium again.
It's a powerful spiritual exercise. You don't know you need something until you go without it. You have to go without it to find out.
Absolutely.
So that's how we've been able to be so successful. Our deals are doing well. We've had distributions throughout this year, no capital calls, and certainly no capital loss. It's through the power of prediction. People that we look up to, Tony Robbins, Gary Keller, being very thoughtful about what you predict, being conservative, being safe, and then just practicing business in alignment with that.
So if you're brand new to us and you've not heard this theory of being a student of the seasons and the economic clock, our goal for tonight is that you leave being able to, end the webinar and immediately go describe what you learned to a spouse or a friend and really have a cogent understanding of what happened. And then if you've been with us for many years, you're seeing this story continue to unfold, right? A clock just continues to go around and around and around. And that's why we also made all of our state of the market presentations over the last several years available right there in one spot. So that's our goal, whether you've been with us for years and years or you're brand new to us, welcome. And we hope this is a really educational time for you, that you leave, feeling like you have a few sentences in your mind about where the market is and where the market might be going in 2026. So good to see so many of you. I see the list of all of our attendees. Feel free to
all-time high for participation for this talk. I'm excited to see so many faces here for this.
Yeah. Feel free to drop your name, tell us where you're from, maybe a little bit about you in the chat.
What you want to know?
Yeah.
What are you fearful about? What are you curious about? How can we make sure that we're tailoring our message to bring the people who are taking their valuable time to show up to get the maximum possible value from our time here together tonight?
That's a great place to ask questions as we go along. Nick and I do, watch that real time and try to answer those questions as they make sense. Sometimes we might say, hey, we have a slide on that, 3-4 slides from now, and we'll get to that question then. But we love Q&A. We love, just as Nick said, making this as applicable to you as possible. So let us introduce ourselves for those of you that are new to our community. We're Nick and Dr. Elaine Stoggeberg. We're married to each other. Sometimes we don't lead with that, just because to us it's we don't go walking around telling people we're married. And after a while, someone might, and we're pretty, we're a little flirty with each other.
I have been touching Elaine just on the small of her back since we've been on camera here.
And after a while, someone will say are you guys married? And I'm like, yes, and to each other.
And to each other.
Nothing scandalous happening here. We have the great privilege of building this amazing life together and then also running these many companies together. We've been married for 14 years. We have 5 children and our 6th child, a little girl, on the way in 2026. So that's state of the market for the Stoggeberg household.
It's springtime, or I guess we're in summer.
We're in summer. Yeah, we're working our hearts out.
Yeah.
We have built Black Swan Real Estate alongside many of you, our passive investors, to about $450 million in assets under management.
I love how you just said building a $1 billion company, just so matter of factly.
Yeah,
that's what it takes.
It's happening.
It's inevitable.
We are very vertically integrated. We manage everything that we own through our sister company, Black Swan Living. We really believe that operations are everything and is where the real value is created in real estate investing. We've raised over $115 million of capital. Our current fund right now is securefreedomfund.com. We've actually closed that for the year so that we can get started on tax paperwork and all of those things. But the wait list is open, and oftentimes when we open it, it does go to our existing investors and then to the wait list before it even opens to the general public. So there's still a ton of value in putting your name on the wait list. If you're interested in that, we'll likely open sometime in late Q1 2026. Have a very active real estate sales team. Nick hangs his license at Keller Williams. Gary Keller is a huge mentor and influence in our lives. And we've done about $250 million in real estate sales. And then we also do ground up development and construction. We built a townhome community. We built an apartment building, right essentially as the neighbor to that townhome community. We've done some adaptive reuse, and we're working on some more development opportunities for 2026. So we are in this market every single day, Nick especially leading this portfolio, leading this company, and being very involved in, all of the day-to-day decisions. And it's really that lens through which we create our state of the market every year. So let's go back and first talk about our 2024 state of the market. And we just actually took, the exact slides from our 2025 economic predictions, and we'll share where we feel like we hit the mark, and then also the ones where we felt like we didn't hit the mark, and maybe describe why we think that happened. And then we'll go into our new predictions.
So this is it. This is our scorecard here. Let us know how we did. We've got kind of green means we nailed it. Yellow is like, maybe. And red means we missed it here. So we're going to talk a little about the seasons. And last year we predicted that winter would give way to spring in the greater economy. And that has been true. That may not be how you feel. And that's something we're going to speak to quite a bit tonight to give you that certainty that you need to take massive action. We have a bullet point here that the U.S. does absolutely amazing compared to the rest of the world. And again, you might be saying, are you kidding me? It's so scary out there. But it is so much worse everywhere else. Imagine like your electricity bill quadrupling. And that's the reality of the situation in many countries in Europe, for example. It's energy insecurity, period. Like the lights turn off or the heat turns off, and there's very little you can do about it. The U.S. is doing absolutely amazing and has the highest GDP growth in the G7 of all kind of developed countries. We predicted that Fed would cut rates immediately after our last State of the Market talk, which I thought was like a really nice kind of tangible interest rates are going down tomorrow, and they did. And we predicted that the Fed rates would come down 1% before our next State of the Market. And we thought they'd come down a little bit faster than they did. Everyone did. But with some economic shifts, tariffs, and other policy changes, it took longer for those rates to come down. But Fed just cut rates a quarter point. It had been 0.75% since our last State of the Market. So Fed coming in like 3 days before our State of the Market talk to give us that 1 percentage point rate cut before our next State of the Market talk. Sustained low energy prices. This is something that very few people seem to realize. But like in our neck of the woods, gas is less than $3 a gallon. And you might remember a time when oil was $100 a barrel, and oil in the last year has gone from $68 a barrel to $58 a barrel. And this was a pretty bold prediction at that time because oil had come down so much, and we were predicting that oil was going to keep coming down, which seems kind of implausible, and that is almost certainly going to continue here in the foreseeable future. And then we predicted that Treasury rates wouldn't decline very much, which again was probably kind of a bold prediction because Treasury rates were declining at the time, and it's kind of confusing to say that Fed rates are going to come down a whole percentage point, but that Treasury rates won't change at all. And that's exactly what happened. So I think we made some pretty bold calls here, and we got 100% on that scorecard.
Here we go. We have a few more slides on this.
Yes. Unemployment, we thought it would stay under control. And back then, a year ago, there was a lot of doom and gloom on the unemployment front. It's almost hard to remember just how gloomy the sentiment was back then. And unemployment was at 4.1% a year ago. Today it's at 4.4%. And then we predicted there'd still be a labor shortage, which again seemed kind of crazy. Like, how could there be a labor shortage if unemployment is staying under control? And we are seeing extraordinary labor shortages. Immigration policy is a huge component of how that's possible for both those things to be true. And both those things have been true. We also predicted that wages would continue to rise, which again, it was a very bold and probably confusing prediction. How the heck could you have a rise in unemployment and have labor shortage and having wages rise? Unemployment is relatively low. Like these are good. It's not 25% unemployment. It's still less than 5% unemployment, and we still have labor scarcity. We predicted that inflation would continue to improve and stabilize. And a year ago, there was a pretty gloomy kind of sentiment about inflation. 6% plus inflation was still very much in our short-term memory. And that's largely kind of past, I feel like, from public consciousness today. And so we predicted it would improve and stabilize, and we went from 3.1% a year ago to 3.0% today. We predicted the U.S. dollar would remain strong in the currency of the world, and there's a lot of de-dollarization kind of doom and gloom in the media, news media, social media. The BRICS coming up with their own alternative to the petrodollar and stuff, and impacts for U.S. government and U.S. debt. And none of that has happened. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy to make these statements, but there's a lot of value in saying, yep, there's a lot of things that aren't going to change, and you can build your future on that firm foundation. We predicted that American reshoring would continue, which is a pretty bold call because we had already seen foreign direct investment coming into the United States go up hundreds of billions of dollars. One of the greatest changes in kind of global capitalism in probably the last 15 years or so. And we saw $400 billion of foreign direct investment come into the U.S., up 25% from the year before. So a staggering amount of money flowing into the United States right now. We predicted GDP growth again a year ago. It was the dead of winter. It was a scary time, and so people were saying there's going to be negative GDP growth, GDP loss. And then we said the big variable was geopolitical instability, and that has been so true. That has been the dominating factor here this
both
last year.
domestically and internationally.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. We also make predictions specifically on the single-family home market and then on the multifamily market. So for our single-family home predictions for 2025, we said a mild winter would give way to a mild and then robust spring, and that's what we're seeing. There's certainly some variation around the country, but in general, that's what's happening in the single-family home market. Mortgage rates would continue to ease, and that would start to unlock pent-up demand. Mortgage rates in December of 2024 were 6.7%, and now they're down to 6.2%. And I've even seen people get in the high fives. And there's just such a different psychological shift there of people feeling like they're stuck in their current mortgage or they're locked out of home ownership versus feeling like, yeah, I can make that payment work with just, even a half or a full percentage point change with mortgage rates. Sales volume picks up but remains lower than 2021. And that's true. There were 4.1 million homes sold in 2025, which is up from 3.9 million in 2024, but 6 million homes in 2021. 2021 is the year that we bought our personal home. It was certainly the year that just Americans were on the move, right? Looking for larger spaces, bigger yards. The interest rates were so low. There was just such movement for there to be 6 million home sales in 2021. It'll likely be many years before we see that number again. And then inventory remains low, but increases. We've gone from 3.7 months of inventory in 2024 to 4.4 months in 2025. It's said that a market is balanced at 6 months, so there's still an extraordinary inventory shortage of single-family homes. And we'll talk about what our predictions are for upcoming inventory in single-family homes, but a little bit more inventory through 2025. And then we thought that home prices would continue to climb even higher, and that didn't happen. Average sales price in 2024 across the entire country was $419,000, and it went down to $415,000. And there's huge variability in different markets. Here in our market, home prices are still growing like 8 or 9% year over year, but in other markets they're going down 20% or even more. But on the whole, across the whole country, home prices stayed the same / went down about 1%. But then starter home prices are increasing the most, and we did see that. So despite the fact that there was a $4,000 decrease in overall single-family home pricing from 24 to 25, there was a $5,000 increase in starter homes from $330,000 to $335,000 for starter homes. So, and that's largely because there aren't enough of them. A couple more single-family home predictions that we made at our 2024 State of the Market. Regional variation is, definitely the story, right? Everyone says real estate is, all about location, location, location. And there was a time in, 2020, 2021, where just like the whole country was doing well. And then there was that time when interest rates were going up, kind of mid 2022 to 2023, where just kind of the whole country, sort of held its breath, and there was kind of a pause. And then what we've been seeing over the last couple of years is, much more, regional variation. Sunbelt's continuing to struggle, but the Midwest is doing well. Sunbelt is down 5% year over year, but the Midwest is up 4%. Remember, that's for single-family homes. New housing starts pick up, but remain lower. And we missed the mark on that one. New home starts were 950,000 in 2024 and decreased to 930,000 in 2025. And we are still just year after year after year hopelessly under where we need to be as a country to fulfill the basic housing needs that we have for our population. We need 1.6 million starts, and we're short. We're at a million both for 2024 and 2025. We'll see where we go in 2026. Single-family home rent growth would be muted as single-family home rentals compete with massive and discounted multifamily deliveries. And that, essentially wasn't true. Single-family home average rents in 24 that was true, was 1,487, and it stayed, essentially steady at 1,500 per month in 2025. We kind of thought that many investors would take 2025 and sell because prices are high. If they bought, even as recently as 2019, 2020, probably would have quite a bit of equity, maybe would be feeling, a little stagnant in real estate or a little shook by the market. And we did miss that one. There were about 400,000 sales, but it was probably the lowest investor sales years in decades. And that's likely because of interest rates. And investors probably felt like, man, if I could just hold on for another year or so, rates will come down, prices will go up, even a little bit more, maybe I can make it work. And then also because of bonus depreciation, right? Once investors are locked into bonus depreciation, they can have a pretty staggering tax consequence if they sell. So we missed the mark on that one. And then few investors buy. So there were fewer than 1 million purchases in 2025 versus 1.2 million in 2024 and 1.5 million in 2021. Again, that 2021 year was just such a big year in both single family and multifamily housing because of the pandemic, because of historically low interest rates, because of the stimulus that was coming into the market. So even through 22, 23, 24, 25, even what we're going to see, in 26, we are still very much in that kind of early post-pandemic world. Kind of, it takes, many years to kind of anchor back, like all the way to 2019, to really get to kind of like a stable historic reality before 2020, and just everything was, both upended with the pandemic and morbidity and mortality, but then also a lot of abundance through those years because of low interest rates and a lot of stimulus and cash in the monetary supply. So we kind of compared a lot of things to 2021 since that was such a boom year, but then we did compare everything there to 2024 when we made these predictions. So those are our predictions for single family homes and how the market looks today, 2024 versus 2025. And then let's take a look at our specific projections that we made in 2024 for multifamily housing. And just another call out, if you have any questions about any of this, pop that into chat.
Is anything surprising here? Like, for example, there's a lot of chatter about how it feels like investors are buying up all the single family homes today. And yet the data says otherwise, that investors purchased like 40% fewer homes last year than they did just a couple years ago. So maybe that perception is dated. That perception is definitely not born in data. This isn't just a victory lap for us. Hopefully this is kind of priming you, thinking about where we are today, where we've been in the last year is the most kind of ready way to frame that. For 2025, our multifamily predictions were quite brutal. We said it was going to be a freezing winter, but we predicted that the corner would turn, that spring would be just around the corner. Spring might even arrive, and that is exactly what happened. We said that things would not improve fast enough. We're going to have some more data on that here in just a little bit. And we talked about kind of the Warren Buffett metaphor of you never figure out who's swimming naked until the tide goes out. And the tide has gone out. And there are a lot of operators syndicators, real estate private equity fund managers who have said, yep, sorry, but this is a total loss. Or, hey, you gave us $100,000 a couple years ago. We've lost that. Could you give us another $20,000 or $50,000 to win your $100,000 back? And we're seeing an incredible amount of that in the marketplace right now. You're seeing a lot of chatter for rescue capital. We said that sales volume would increase, but remain lower than 2021, 2022, which would seem a little strange since we predicted this freezing, brutal winter. But what we saw is that many operators just couldn't hold out anymore. They were finally contemplating foreclosure, just handing the keys back to the lender, or bringing in some new operator, something like that, in conjunction with that kind of capital loss event, and that is exactly what happened. We also predicted that listing volume would increase dramatically, and there wouldn't be a lot of equity basically to go with those listings, which would have an impact on pricing essentially. And we saw 22,000 units for sale nationally in 2024, tick up to 27,000 units for sale in 2025. So far we're all green across the board for our multifamily predictions on 2025. And here's our second set of predictions. So a huge portion of the market is institutional buyers. So not people like Elaine and I. I guess when we're a $1 billion company, you might call us institutional buyers. But I think we're just a mom and pop that refused to get too sophisticated as we got bigger. So these are hedge funds or REITs or pension funds that place capital in different types of real estate assets. And we saw that our prediction, kind of rang true there. And those institutional buyers came back into the marketplace, and a significant uptick in their investment. We expected that prices would increase from a bottom in 2024, but remain much lower than 2021, 2022, which again might sound kind of weird, like our labor and wage predictions. How is it that sales volume could increase and a bunch of operators are announcing capital loss and foreclosure and bankruptcy while sales volume increases and prices go up? At some point when you hit the bottom, there's going to be a point in time when all those factors converge before a recovery actually occurs. That really is your when you've hit bottom. And that is precisely what has happened in 2025. So just looking at some national stats here, in 2021, average per unit sales price was $220,000 a unit. In 2022, $250,000 a unit. Went from $220 to $250. If your eyes kind of glaze over hearing about institutional capital, just look at this. Like, how much do you pay per pound per unit in multifamily? Went from $220 to $250. Then in 2023, the average sales price went down from $250,000 to $190,000. That price crashed. So if you had a 20 or 30% down, loan on that multifamily, you're wiped out. Your capital is gone. In 2024, we saw, just a tiny recovery from 190K to 191K. And then in 2025, an average sales price of $215,000. So that's that absolute bottom moment. We kind of called bottom for the market, and bottom, it arrived. And that's why we've bought so much real estate here this year. Lots of regional variation. Sunbelt struggling, Midwest doing well. Lots of new units delivered in the Sunbelt. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. Rents declining in those areas. We'll have some pretty profound charts on that effect there. Rents are down 5% year over year in Austin, Texas, and they're up 2% year over year here in Rochester, Minnesota. We see, we predicted that regional banks would kind of work with their customers and try to get through these tough times. But people who worked with debt funds, mezzanine debt providers, kind of sharp pref equity funds, those people would eat their clients, and that's exactly what happened. There's countless deals that I've kind of investigated where that exact dynamic happened. It's not hard to figure out. You just look at public records. Who is the lender? Oh, that person is now the owner, and it's XYZ Opportunity Fund is typically their favorite euphemism for lenders in the loan-to-own business.
Let's talk about how we could have predicted all of this. So you'll see that when we make our predictions, we tend to speak from a certain topic and then a certain direction. And that really all comes from being a student of seasons. We find that it's much less important to have like very specific numbers, very specific percentages, those sorts of things, versus having some understanding of, are things stable? Are they going to improve a little bit, improve a lot, decline a little bit, or decline a lot? That's kind of our algorithm. And it all comes back to being a student of the seasons. We had this picture hanging in our office for quite some time. It's just a beautiful tree that shows spring, summer, fall, and winter. And let's just spend just a couple of minutes teaching about the seasons. For those of you that this is new to, it's a truly a life-changing paradigm. It's super simple, but kind of hear it as though you're hearing it for the first time. And for those of you who have been with us for a long time, hear it again, right? Hear it with a beginner's mindset and think about how can you apply this to whatever it is that you have going on in your life, your personal life, your health, your partnership, your children, your own investing. The seasons shows up everywhere. So springtime is a time when things are easy, things are abundant. There's planting, there's growth, all the birds are out, there's just the morning's easy, everything feels good, everyone's excited, a lot of joy and kind of a lightness in the air, right? A lot of kind of pent up, like, oh, it feels so good after a long winter. We live in Rochester, Minnesota, where we very much get all four seasons. And so we know when spring is coming, right? Weeks before spring is coming, right? Our kids are even like, I don't need a coat today. And I'm like, I don't know, buddy. It's like 25 degrees. Like it's not spring yet, honey, right? But there's that pent up feeling. And then summer is joyful, but hard. Summer is a time where you're working all day and night. The days are long. There's back-breaking heat, right? You can kind of think of that farmer who's up at dawn, out in the fields all day, maybe takes a quick break for a quick meal and a glass of water and then is right back at it and really trying to make use of all of those hours of daylight. And, we live in a place where we live or we work, in town. There's a Costco like literally right there, but we have to drive about 15 minutes. And so we pass a number of fields to get to our home. And there's always a period in like June where I'll look at a field and I'll think like, oh, I wonder if they're resting that field this year. And then, lo and behold, mid-July comes and boom, everything's green and growing. And I'm like, how could I have thought that they were resting that field? But that's what happens in summer, right? Is there's that sense of, is anything really happening? Did my seed take? Am I doing the right things? Did I plant at the right time? Am I giving the seed and the soil enough water and nutrients? Is, how big is the crop going to be? Is it all going to work out? And then fall comes and there's just this sense of, almost euphoria, right? Think about how cultures all over the world celebrate so many holidays around the idea of fall festivals and harvests and abundance. And, there's that sense of joy of like, we did it, right? We planted in spring, we worked our hearts out in summer, all of those, long hours under the sun and that back-breaking labor, it was all worth it. Look at how much we have right now. Look at how much we have to share. And if you're smart, you store for winter. And if you're not smart, you spend it all in fall, right? Whether that's a food crop or an economic crop. And then comes winter. And for people that know that winter's coming, it comes and it's just like, well, of course, right? Like we live in Minnesota. Of course, winter's going to come. Of course, we need our boots, our coats. We need to have
trucks.
Our plow trucks. Yes. Everything ready. But for those that aren't a student of the seasons, there's so much, euphoria, right? Even though summer can be a time of hard work and long days, there's a lot of euphoria in spring, summer, and fall that it can seem like, oh my gosh, these times are going to last forever. And I certainly sense that, with many investors, and I would have to caution my own self against it in like 2020, 2021, even early 2022 of, it is unlikely that these low interest rates will last forever. I don't know exactly when they'll change, but we don't stay in spring and summer forever, right? I can know nothing about economics, don't even know what the Fed is or who the chair is, who's this Jerome guy, all the things, but have some sense of there's always a winter. It always happens. And then conversely, in winter, if you stored in fall, winter's not that bad, right? You can even find ways to enjoy it. You can share what you've stored up. You can learn. You can prepare. You can get ready for the next spring.
My kids love snow tubing.
They do. You plan for that next spring. You think, what did I plant and what was successful and what wasn't, and who can I learn from so that I'm planting, even better this next springtime around. But winter feels long, right? Winter is a tiring season. Even if you're enjoying it, right? The days are short, the nights are long, it's cold, it's hard. If you didn't, plant and tend and harvest, there's a sense of, gosh, we've got to get out of this before I starve to death. And even if you did all of those things, there's a sense of anticipation of like, oh, I want spring to come. I love spring. I'm ready to get started again. And that pattern shows up everywhere. We could take a 5-minute work break in this webinar and say, hey, go sketch where you are in your personal life, in your health, in your marriage, with your children, in your career, in your investing, in your real estate portfolio. And all of us would be, in different places, across those different domains and in the different seasons. And then we can look at things, sort of more holistically of where is the U.S. economy as a whole, not just the real estate economy, but where is the U.S. economy? Because real estate, all the parts of the economy impact real estate, right? Labor, materials, energy prices, all of those things come in. And then it's specifically what season is the U.S. real estate market in? And that's essentially what we follow, right? Like if you just listen to those last 5 minutes about the seasons and really take it with a beginner's mind, right? Like as humans, we often have a tendency to look at something and say like, well, that's so simple, right? Like how could that possibly be, this magic way of understanding such a complex apparatus like the U.S. economy or the U.S. real estate market? But simplicity is power. I was listening to a podcast from one of my coaches earlier today. She was sharing her framework for planning the year. And I literally laughed out loud. It's like 58 minutes into a 1 hour, 11-minute presentation. And she's showing her goals for the year on the Zoom screen. And she says something like, don't overcomplicate it. so many people have the problem of overcomplicating their goals and then they accomplish nothing. And she just said it like so deadpan, like it was just a matter of fact statement. She wasn't laughing, but I just was like, had to pause it. I was laughing, and I was at a place where I needed to step away and go into a meeting anyway. And so I thought this is a great place to kind of end, because it's such an important lesson, right? Master the fundamentals, master the very simple things, the things that you can hold in your head, that you can explain to, a child. And then from there, you can build on layers of nuance and complexity. But until you really master those foundations, it's very hard to make predictions. And it's very hard to interpret all of the data that's out there, right? You go to one news source and everything's great. You go to another news source and everything's terrible. Up and down, in and out, what's happening. But if you have some sense of the seasons, there can be tough days in summer, but you're still in summer. There can be wonderful days with a ton of sunshine in winter, but you're still in winter. Right? There can be rainy, cloudy, gloomy days in spring, but you're still in spring, and you have some sense of kind of where you are, right? And you can make some sense about where you are, where things have been, where things are likely to go, and then everything becomes so much easier.
Beautiful.
Love it.
We'd love to hear in chat, what season do you think the U.S. economy is in? And what season do you think the U.S. real estate market is in? Could be single family, could be multifamily. Just throw it into chat. This will really help us kind of gauge where y'all are at. And we're like very sincerely curious, what season do you think the U.S. economy is in, and what season do you think the U.S. real estate market is in? They could be in the same season. They could be in different seasons. It doesn't have to be the same. One affects the other, but they aren't necessarily moving in lockstep. Why do you think that's the case? You can go ahead and throw that into chat, or send us a message if you feel self-conscious sharing that with everyone in chat there.
And while you guys are doing that, I'll answer a question that came in. Besides Minnesota and Illinois, what states do you consider as part of the Midwest? So we would consider the Midwest to be Minnesota, the Dakotas, Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois. What else would you include there?
Yeah, the Dakotas, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, all the way down to Kansas. I think by the time you get to Oklahoma, Oklahoma's part Midwest, but really kind of like the little cousin of Texas. And then by the time you get east to Missouri, I think you're in the South. So, and you probably, I don't know if I would include Idaho in the Midwest. It's kind of, Idaho's kind of its own thing. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
All right, so we've got some votes that came in while we were answering
all
that
over
question.
The place here.
Yeah.
Spring, fall, winter.
We've got spring with an exclamation point and a question mark. I love that. I can hear the upward inflection, like spring. We've got fall with just a question mark, no exclamation point on that one. I love that. And that was for the economy. I believe we are in spring for real estate and still in winter for the economy. No punctuation on that one. Just a straight statement.
That's certainty speaking right there.
Love it. And then we have a vote for the U.S. economy being in winter and real estate being in fall. So we literally have real estate is definitely in spring is another one that came in. So I think we have all four seasons represented here.
We've got great representation. Fortunately, this is not a mysterious thing to figure out. This is not a mysterious thing to figure out, but it can feel awfully mysterious. So before we give you one of the tools that we use to figure out what season we're in, let's talk just a little bit about kind of an elephant in the room, because you're going to hear from us today a lot of information about how things are pretty good out there, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, things don't feel so good. Let's take a look at a few charts here. So we've got the stock market chart here. It's going up and to the right. The stock market is growing. We've got our inflation chart there in the bottom left, and inflation finally under control. Wish it was at 2%, but man, we'll take a stable 3%. That beats the heck out of 9%, and eggs getting more expensive by the hour. And then in the bottom right, we've got U.S. mortgage rates, and they went up, they went down, and it seems like they're at a pretty low point. So if gas is under $3 a gallon and unemployment is low, why doesn't it feel like things aren't amazing right now? The number one pain point when you ask people about the economy is housing. And you're going to see a slide a little bit later on about just how unaffordable housing is. And we're going to spend some time talking about why housing is unaffordable, and why right now we're kind of stuck in a negative feedback loop on housing affordability right now, and why we really need to break out of that. But housing is by far the number one pain point. And the funny thing is, something like 73% of Americans right now have a mortgage below 5%. So most people actually have an incredibly affordable mortgage payment. Elaine and I, our personal mortgage is 2.5% on our personal home. We have insanely affordable housing right now. But even for those people that have an affordable mortgage, they feel locked in. They feel like, oh, I can't go upgrade or downsize or relocate for a job or whatever. And then the people who don't enjoy that, the 27% of people who don't enjoy that, they feel like they are locked out of the housing market altogether. A lot of people, they have these lagging perceptions from inflation. They're just now figuring out how expensive things are. Like you do this, this order from Walmart and you realize you ordered the exact same thing 3 years ago. It shows up in your order history and you're like, whoa. It was half of the cost. I can't believe the cost has gone up that much. So even though inflation has really tamed, is in a pretty good spot today, people are still feeling the effects of those inflation, kind of spikes emotionally. Another thing is that even though the U.S. has amazing GDP growth, right now it's estimated that more than half of all that GDP growth is coming from AI. That's capital investment and the build out of data centers. It's also the additional productivity that AI is contributing to our economy right now. Well, that's not productivity that people are going to be able to feel. And then there's definitely a hangover effect from easy money in the pandemic. There was a window of time there when people could get paid a lot of money to not work and order their DoorDash and hang out and watch TV or whatever they wanted to do to enjoy their leisure time. And now, just like in 2019, you might be expected to go to the office and work 40 or 50 hours a week to earn an income, and you may not be able to afford to get a taxi for your burrito. And maybe you've gotten really accustomed to that burrito taxi for several years, and that's just not an economic reality that's feasible for you anymore. And that hangover, that's a tough hangover to get past. There's a lot of political polarization out there that's accentuated by social media. And as social media consumption continues to increase, people now spend more time on social media than they spend speaking with friends, coworkers, and their significant other. You're not just looking at yourself compared to others. You're looking at yourself compared to the best, borderline fictitious version of other people's lives. And so you feel like your personal economy is not so great. Look at them. They're flying on a private jet. No, they're not flying on a private jet. I have a friend of a friend. He has a business where all he does is rent out his private jet on the tarmac. Doesn't go anywhere. Like he flies the plane to a destination. People, influencers come get on the plane, do a full media shoot on the plane as though they are flying in the private jet. They're not going anywhere. They're just getting pictures on the tarmac with a Rolls Royce next to it or something like that. That's not real. And when you see that,
the doors to the car always have to be open.
Yes. Yep,
yes.
Absolutely.
It's a shot.
Absolutely. Yes. So those are a few reasons why right now it may not feel like things are so good, but the fact is things are pretty darn good. Things this year, 2025, was undoubtedly one of the top 5 years to be an alive human on Earth in the history of humanity. And we should take a moment to just live in gratitude for that we get the privilege to live in the United States in 2025. It's one of the most advantageous times, moments, places to be a human. And there are unlimited opportunities that are available in front of you if you can just recognize the season that we're in and the exceptional gift that we've been given. So how do we know which season we're in? We use a tool called the economic clock. So recommend that if you're kind of listening in podcast mode and you've not seen the clock before, check it out. Here's a history of some of our predictions. We've been using this tool for quite a while. It's a very simple tool. So if you go back and look at our historical state of the market predictions, if you don't believe some of our historical predictions and how kind of on the money we've been in the past, in December 2021, we called the pandemic is over. Omicron came out. Elaine had done insane deep research on on hundreds of years of pandemics. And hey, they take about 2 years to resolve. They become more transmissible and less virulent. And then this thing happens where
I remember being so frustrated that so many states were turning off rental assistance in January of 2022. And I'm like, wait a second. People are back to the office. Some of the states are taking away masks or, not enforcing masks as much. And everybody's going to get sick in January of 2022. But then after that, everyone will have been sick or, will have been vaccinated and things will kind of get back to normal. And that is exactly what happened. We had more delinquency in January of 2022. I can just see the emails in my head. Hey, I got COVID. I'm going to be out of work for 10 days. I'll get rent, but it won't be on February 1st. There's no rental assistance anymore, so I'll just have to catch up. So there was all this relief for rental housing through 2020 and 2021 at a time when people were working from home and there was the eviction moratoriums and all of those things. And then a lot of those things, like they're just like, political will kind of fizzled out by the end of 2021. And then right then was when the pandemic kind of had its last like big hurrah in January, February of 2022. I just was so frustrated with it. I was so frustrated. But
So
we made a lot of moves then.
We called it. Everyone else was living at 11 o'clock when there's easier money in January of 2022. And in December 2021, January 2022, we said, no. The clock is striking 1. Rates are about to skyrocket, and that clock is going to race forward, and we're going to see a collapse in multifamily values. We're going to see the market seize up with single-family home sales, and that's exactly what we predicted through. We actually did another state of the market in February 2022. We were pounding the table, begging people, listen, some tough times are coming. Not end times, but tough times are coming. Winter is coming. Go refi, get some fixed rate debt. If you are in a real estate syndication, if you are in a investment property with a variable rate loan, you must get out of that right now. We know the cost of that fixed rate debt just doubled. It went from 2.5% to 5%. Get it now before it's 10%. And some people did, but a lot of other people, unfortunately, have frozen to death. November 2022, we called midnight of the winter solstice. I remember, December 2023 was midnight of the winter solstice. 2022, we called 6 o'clock. And then in 2023, we said,
we were still at 6 o'clock.
At 6 o'clock.
Yeah. So, and we show that to say, like, we don't just like click one forward, like, oh, it's another year. Let's click one forward. Here we go. Like, we really think about it. And from November of 2022 to December of 2023, we felt like, things moved a little bit. December of 23, I think, was the year that we played Are We Out of the Woods by Taylor Swift. And we're like, we think we're out of the woods. We're going to call it that it's midnight on the darkest, coldest night of winter, but spring will come. And then we did our next state of the market a little early in 2024 because we felt like things were just moving pretty quickly through 24. And our behavior reflects this. So we only had one closing in 2023. And the only reason we closed it in 2023 is because it just took so gosh darn long to get all the closing together. We got that deal under contract in October of 2022.
Yep.
And it just took like 6 months to close it. Otherwise, we didn't acquire anything in 2023, right? For,
almost 2 years.
Like for... to give you some frame of reference, this year we're going to close about $100 million. Last year we closed about $100 million. So in 23 we closed one deal at let's call it $25 million. But that's really kind of a technicality because we got it under contract in 2022. We felt like it was a dark winter, and we said, you know what, we're gonna rest. We're gonna take really good care of what we have. We're gonna improve our vertical integration, really try to push income as much as we can, control expenses as much as possible, and just make sure we have enough to get through winter. And then 2024, we felt like we were past the winter solstice. And so to some extent, we put the pedal to the metal and bought, kind of as much as we could safely operationalize in 2024 because we knew that spring was coming and we wanted to be, just a step ahead. I was that mom for so many years that would like roll into Costco when it had already snowed, trying to get my kids like snow gear. Number one, because I hadn't lived in Minnesota before. Number two, because I was in residency and all the things. And I'm like, Nick, where are all the snow pants? And he's like, honey, those were for sale in like September. Like, we're going to have to go to Amazon and pay, quadruple the price. And I didn't want that feeling in our investment portfolio. So I said, let's go, right? Let's go while everyone else, still thinks that we're in the deep of winter. Let's plan for spring. And now we're just, we're a hair ahead. In December of 25, we've gone from 7 o'clock on the economic clock to 8 o'clock. 7 o'clock is falling interest rates, and 8 o'clock is rising share prices. And spring is right there, kind of right on the tips of our tongues, tips of our fingers. And you'll see here when we talk about in a couple of slides here, there's no like announcement for spring, right? There's no like day that spring, has arrived. If you live in a climate with all four seasons, you'll know that it seems like spring happens and then there's a little bit of snow, or it seems like spring and then, I thought I could put the kids' boots away, but maybe I'll wait, another week or 10 days. It's the exact same thing with the change of the seasons economically. There's no one big declaration of spring. but knowing that it's coming and being just a couple of steps ahead allows you to prepare while everyone else still is feeling the psychological effects of winter.
Which brings us to one of our favorite Warren Buffett quotes here: "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." What time on the clock would you want to buy real estate? So just kind of look at that clock, and you can know where you are on the clock, looking at like Fed, interest rate cuts. So we know that there's falling interest rates. So we're probably somewhere around 7 o'clock, right? There's really very little debate about this. The economy is somewhere between 6 and 8 o'clock if the Fed is actively cutting rates month after month after month. And you probably want to be buying real estate somewhere around 6 o'clock. You want to be greedy when others are fearful. When you're in the depth of the winter solstice, you probably don't want to be buying real estate when you're at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, ideally, because real estate values are going to continue to go down until you pass 6 o'clock. And then you probably don't want to be buying real estate when it's 11 o'clock and you're about to see really rising real estate prices. And this is if you perfectly time the market. It's impossible to know exactly when these moments are. In retrospect, it could be clear, but prospectively, you can just say, yep, we know that we're at about here, and this is probably the next step on the clock. We have timed the purchase of our assets with where we're at on the clock, and you can see we've almost come full circle. We started at about 11 o'clock, I think, is around where our timeline started. We called 1 o'clock, and now we're coming up on spring. It may not feel like it in kind of common consciousness, but if you want to survive and thrive in this winter season, you have to know when spring is around the corner and when spring is upon us, which is right now.
Mm-hmm. I am a big believer, you said something like, timing acquisitions. And I'm a big believer that for the most part, there's always an opportunity to buy. It's, just about doing it strategically. I just shared with you how we took a big step back in 23. But we were buying, right, when prices were going up at that 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, noon. And really what we tried to focus on then was competing on terms, right? So that's well outside of the scope of a state of the market. That itself could be its own masterclass. But we would, just be very transparent with sellers to say, we're probably not your top dollar for price, but we're probably the most flexible in terms. How long we'll be under contract, certainty to close, all of those things. And we got a lot of our acquisitions, and we would see other offers, where we were hundreds of thousands or even millions lower than other offers, but we had more favorable terms. So there's more to compete on than just price. There's that terms piece as well, and again, that could be its own masterclass unto itself.
So we gave you a really scientific tool to know where are we at in the economic cycle, and what is the next couple notches on the clock look like. And here's a fantastic tool to understand what's going on with interest rates. Interest rates are not a mysterious thing. The Fed raises and lowers interest rates based on their perception of where we're at in the season. Where are interest rates going? We think that the Fed is probably going to drop rates one or two more times, one or two more quarter point reductions in this coming year. And critically, they just announced a quantitative easing program. This is going to result in mortgage rates coming down just a little bit. And what we're seeing is lending is finally starting to thaw out. So we have lenders reaching out to us, wanting to do business. This is an about face from 2023 when we had a hard time getting debt of any kind. That's one reason why we weren't doing deals, is because no one was lending. If you haven't looked at it, take a look at the CME Fed Watch tool. It's something we talked about a couple webinars ago. And this just looks at the futures markets and kind of extrapolates that data into the likelihood that Fed rate cuts or hikes might be coming. So those are your first couple predictions here for this coming year.
The biggest challenge for 2026 will be government debt. Nick talks about government debt, probably as much as I'll let him. And then the second thing he talks about is our next slide. Go ahead. I wouldn't steal your joy.
Government debt's a big problem, and this is a pretty new problem. So on the chart on the right here, you can see federal debt held by the public as a percent of GDP from the year 1900 to today. So this is a pretty big time frame. You can see there was a big spike in government debt after or during World War II, and then federal debt levels came down, and then you can see that debt levels went up way before the pandemic. We were almost at wartime spending levels in the 2010s. It doesn't make any sense at all. And then we actually we exceeded, like when we were waging World War II and we were building 10,000 Liberator bombers and jeeps and tanks. Somehow we had less debt on the books as a nation then than we do today. That's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. Where's that money going? It's not going to economically productive things.
And multiple administrations.
Yeah,
so this isn't a political statement.
We try to make very few political things here. We think of politics as kind of like the weather. Like you need to know when it's hot or when it's cold, when it's rainy or snowy. And it is what it is. And to rage against it is probably not a good use of your time or effort. Just know that when the government borrows money, it creates massive upward pressure on inflation. And that puts massive upward pressure on interest rates, ultimately weakening the U.S. dollar, and it creates a lot of distortion effects in the U.S. economy. If the government reduces its spending, interest rates go down. So if the government passes a balanced budget, all of a sudden you would see all these interest rates come way down. So if you are upset that your mortgage rate is not higher, what you really need to do is write your congressman, write your senator and say, please pass a balanced budget. I don't care what your political beliefs are. I think all people would agree that a balanced budget would be a good thing. And that's all we need to do. And all we would need to do, by the way, is improve revenue about, I'm going to stop. It's not hard.
I wasn't lying.
It's not hard.
I wasn't lying. Sometimes I'll say, Nick, will you tell me a story as I'm falling asleep? And these are the stories he tells me. Like to our kids, we read, so the littler kids get nursery rhymes and the older kids get like chapter books. And I get government spending and AI in China. So Carry on.
So that's the biggest challenge is debt. But there's two huge risks that are on the horizon. And to say it this way, if a news story isn't about government debt, AI, or China, it's not very interesting to me because these are probably the three fulcrums that really move everything in our universe for the next few years. So if you haven't read it yet, check out If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, or check out like a summary video on YouTube or something like that. It's a very simple, easy to understand topic. Elaine and I have been talking about the AI singularity since basically, so 15 years. I have a bachelor's degree in ministry and I have a bachelor's degree in computer science. And I remember studying for my computer science degree in 2002, 2003. One of the probably top 5 people who invented the computer was one of my professors. I was very fortunate to go to a great school that had some incredible professor staff, and they talked a lot about the singularity and how this was a predictable thing as computers got more and more powerful. They would double in power for about every 18 months, and somewhere in the late 2020s, a computer would become about powerful enough to be as powerful as a human brain, and then 18 months later, it would be twice as powerful as a human brain. And humanity wouldn't be, it would sneak up on us like a brain that's half as smart as a human brain. Well, that's like a dog or something like that. And it seems cute. And then 18 months later, it's as smart as a human. It's like, whoa, that's crazy. But now I have a best friend I can talk to. And then 18 months after that, it's twice as smart as a human. And that's a really scary thing. And we're in this arms race that is on par with the nuclear arms race that happened during the Cold War. But it took, almost half a century for that Cold War to play out. The AI arms race is going to play out most likely in the next 5 to 10 years or potentially slightly sooner. This is going to drive GDP growth. It's going to drive inflation, unemployment, interest rates, public sentiment. If you are not researching AI and having a grasp on how it impacts us, like it does not matter what celebrity is in. That's actually kind of a hateful thing because I know you follow some of those celebrity relationships. Okay, follow some celebrity relationships, but just try to focus.
I pretty much only follow Taylor these days.
Okay, I think that's
and she's pretty stable. She's getting married. Things are good. Tour's over. Documentary's out. We're good.
So let's talk about China. And again, feel free to throw comments in the chat if there's any specific questions you have here. These are things that we look at. We run our company. We have a grasp on how interest rates are probably going to change because that has such a huge impact on our business. And those are quite predictable, generally speaking. And we have a pretty firm grasp on AI and our relationship with China. So China has been very clear that they will be taking Taiwan. There's no ambiguity about that. They're building amphibious assault ships and doing drills to simulate attacking U.S. aircraft carriers. And this has escalated significantly just in the last year. So this is something that we keep kind of beating the drum on, just like we talked about the shifting, kind of virulency in the pandemic and how that's going to affect interest rates. At some point, the most likely year is 2027. It's probably not going to happen in 2026. China will likely execute some sort of blockade operation against Taiwan. Different intelligence agencies put it somewhere between a 20 and 60% chance that there will be some sort of China won't just like land troops one day. They'll blockade Taiwan and say, yep, Taiwan is now part of China, and people are either going to accept that they're Chinese citizens or they're going to starve to death. And what are you going to do about it, world? Well, Japan, just started operating aircraft carriers for the first time since World War II. They now have first strike capabilities, guided cruise missiles and so forth, attack submarines, F-35 fighters, and Japan just made a public statement here in the last week that if China blockades Taiwan, that is considered an act of war against Japan, which is a big deal. So if you rewind the clock, just to the previous administration, there was a policy of strategic ambiguity where countries like the United States and Japan would not say the word Taiwan because it would upset China so much to say the word Taiwan that it would hurt your GDP. And they would not say that they would come to Taiwan's rescue. Fast forward to today, and the U.S., Japan are clearly saying that if China not invades Taiwan but blockades Taiwan, that is an act of war, and there will be a hot war just like there is in Ukraine right now. And if you go watch our State of the Market talk from before the Ukraine war started, what was our number one risk in the middle of the pandemic? The number one risk on our board was geopolitical instability. We said, listen, the pandemic has put a freeze on a lot of aggression, and that's about to come out in all sorts of nasty ways that'll be difficult to predict. This is a big deal. And this is something we take action on. So the first question we ask when we're looking at where do we get our cabinets from is, do they come from China? We really can't source anything from China at this time because it's probably not a reliable supply chain. And even if this never comes to fruition, even if this is just a gray zone tactic, kind of Cold War thing, there's going to continue to be significant decoupling between the U.S. economy and the Chinese economy that will have massive economic effects. We have 2 years worth of laptops in inventory right now at our company. We went and we spent $20,000 on laptops, on extra unneeded laptops, because if this happened, it would suddenly become very difficult to purchase a laptop for probably a couple of years. It doesn't cost that much money to buy a couple of years worth of laptops, and you have them in case you need backups or spares or something like that. We're not disaster preppers. We just know that it is very likely there will be significant supply chain disruptions as a result of this growing conflict.
So those are some of our kind of, we'll call that like the background things that we're thinking about as we think about, the economic clock, the seasons, the major things to think about. I think Nick said it very well of like, these are the things that we think are signal, right? The rest is kind of noise, but the things that we think are signal are AI, China, and going back to this slide, government debt. And then let's go into our 2026 economic predictions. So, get your pencils out, take notes. These are the exact things that we'll be sharing in probably November, December of 26 and saying, did we call this one right? Or how did we land on this prediction? These are our 2026 predictions for the general economy.
Drum roll.
Yeah.
These high quality mics don't pick it up.
Don't pick up the drum roll. And then we'll have our predictions for single family homes and multifamily.
Yeah. So we see winter giving way to spring, but it's not going to feel like that. We've talked about that theme quite a bit. That's going to continue to be the case in 2025 for the people that have clarity, the people that find a tribe that empowers them to take massive action. 2026 is going to be an absolutely incredible year. When we look at our dashboard, we're potentially in a situation where we could, execute, financing, favorable financing on a significant portion of our portfolio. We'll see how 2026 plays out. We're going to have an opportunity where we can buy a lot of additional assets, where we can successfully raise capital. It's going to be at a sweet spot, springtime, for a lot of industries, including the multifamily real estate industry, but only for the people that have that clarity, that have that drive to take massive action and realize that it's going to be one of the best years in human history to be a human here in the United States. AI is going to dominate everything: growth, jobs, news, politics. U.S. is going to continue to lead China in the AI arms race, but only barely. So we locked them out of chips. I have lots of friends in the industry, and one of my friends reached out and he's like, "Hey Nick, the U.S. government, the consulate just reached out and said I have 24 hours to leave China or I renounce my citizenship." That's how aggressive the U.S. is being on chip export and stuff like that. It's not secret. It's not noisy. We're doing everything we can to deny chips to China. The chips that China has are like 10 times less efficient than ours. But the Chinese thinking is so incredible. They're like, okay, no problem. We'll just build 10 times more electricity. So this year, the Chinese government will build more solar capacity than exists in the entire United States that's ever been built in the history of the United States. So China, no big deal. We'll just build 10 times more electricity, and they will catch up as they get access to more electricity in 2026. U.S. is going to do absolutely amazing compared to the rest of the world. No one else is even on the board right now with how the U.S. is doing in every economic indicator. We're going to see positive U.S. GDP growth led by our dominance in the AI race. And at some point, there's going to be a singularity event that could lead to like double-digit GDP growth. Probably not coming in 2026, but it's a very big deal. We need to build that capacity and build those data centers. We're going to see the U.S. still be the currency of the world, the reserve currency of the world. There will not be a challenger for that. And anyone that says, oh, de-dollarization, they're just trying to get some fear, uncertainty, and doubt eyeball time from you. We're going to see Fed rates come down at least 25% before, or I'm sorry, not 25%, a quarter point.
That would be like negative 20%.
This is a critical. Just think about this for a moment, because earlier in the presentation, you said that, or we said that, it's likely that rates will come down. 1 or 2 rate cuts, probably 2 rate cuts. But here our prediction is at least 0.25%, which means we don't think there's really any possibility of rates going up. It's a conservative projection. We could say we think that it'll go down a half point, and most likely it will. That is the most statistically likely outcome according to all the data. But we try to be conservative in our projections and think about what you can do with that. So if you know that rates are likely going down and not up, and they're going to go down a little bit, not a huge amount, you might want to get some debt that might be indexed off of prime rate that closely follows Fed rate, assuming there might be a small benefit to it. There's specific decisions you could make based on that exact way that prediction is formulated. There's very specific things we're trying to formulate there. We're going to see low energy prices. We're going to see 30-year mortgages, probably be steady, hopefully decline a little bit. We're going to see unemployment continue to rise just a little bit, but stay under control. It's not going to be 10% or 25% unemployment like during the Great Depression. But we are going to see people really start to fear AI, and they're going to see AI take their job in a tangible way that has not happened before. Inflation is going to stay steady, but it will not get to that 2% level. There's no path to that right this second.
Let's share our predictions for single-family homes. Single-family home market, is kind of a cousin to multifamily housing, but in a lot of ways is very different. For many years, it sort of felt like single-family and multifamily were kind of the same. Just everything was rising, everything was easy. There was so much money. But really, when interest rates changed, that's where it became very obvious to many investors that the single-family home market is very different than the multifamily market. It's related to interest rates, but nowhere near as closely tied. That's kind of one way to think about the similarities and the differences between single-family and multifamily. Let's talk about single-family home inventory. This really is the story in our country for, I'm looking at since 2007, right? So we're going on, 17 years of this being the story in our country. There are just not enough single-family homes. I'm sure you've heard us say it before. It's worth repeating. So many builders, plumbers, electricians, real estate agents, you name it, left the industry in that 2008 collapse and went and became teachers and police officers and, got jobs in office and, who knows, and never re-entered the trades. And so there's been a lack of inventory over the last, going on 2 decades that has created the situation that we're in. Inventory is increasing, but continues to remain low. Sales volume will be down 25% year over year. And why is that? Because 73% of existing mortgages are below 5%. So people feel, pretty stuck, right? You can kind of pencil out the math that, hey, even if I, let's say I'm trying to downsize and I'm moving from, a $600,000 house to a $400,000 house. And I think, I'll save on, energy and, maintenance and all of those things, but just the cost of the debt alone can make it that it makes more financial sense to stay in the bigger house. And until we really see, rates come down more than they are right now, so many people have that perception of feeling stuck. And then that kind of seizes up the whole market, right? Because then people aren't going into larger homes. They're not downsizing. They're not moving from city to city. It makes it harder for new entrants to come into home ownership. You need flow in any market, whether it's housing or widgets. You need for there to be flow in the market. And there's just a lack of flow, which is going to slow down sales volume, despite people wanting housing, right? People need a place to live. They want a place to live. They want home ownership. The market is just kind of seized up. Sunbelt inventory will remain high and prices will decline, and Midwest inventory will remain low and prices will be steady or increase. We've said in our market, month after month after month, the data comes out and reliably shows that year over year, from let's say May of 25 to May of 24, September of 25 to September of 24, in our market, single-family homes are increasing in value, 8 to 9% year over year. But in other parts of the country, they're decreasing by that much or more. And as interest rates fall and mortgage rates fall, sales volume will increase because people will have higher sentiment. People will feel like they're able to unlock their existing mortgages and move on to another housing situation. But then prices will rise. I don't think we put anything in about the kind of the chatter with the 50-year mortgage that was in the news a couple of weeks ago. It was really our perception that was kind of like a big boom in the news cycle for a week or so and then kind of fizzled out. It was our perception that would not necessarily help homeowners. It might help that rare few that kind of struck immediately while they were able to get a 50-year mortgage and lower their monthly payment, but prices hadn't changed. But ultimately, the economy, really functions based on payments. And so very quickly, if a 50-year mortgage is introduced to the market, the sales price of existing inventory will go up quite a bit. It could probably help new development because it would give some breathing room for developers and builders to build more of those starter homes and get those into inventory. But in general, it would look like it would be helpful, but it wouldn't actually, be helpful because it would just, increase the overall price because you're spreading out. We've seen that with cars, with all of the other things. You can look at debt across various industries over, many decades and see that when the amortization lengthens, it often just raises the price of whatever that thing is. And then let's talk about single family home supply. So right now we are at a shortage of somewhere between 3 and 5 million of single family homes in the country. We need to be building 1 million per year to keep up with demand. And we're just not hitting that number. And we've not been hitting that number for a long time, right? So you can think of single family homes as like a game of musical chairs, right? If there's 10 people and 12 chairs, you can take 5 minutes before you sit in a chair, right? Like you can decide which chair you want. You can have a conversation. If there's 10 people and 10 chairs, you got to move. If there's 10 people and 9 chairs, the things get really competitive, right? Just a small imbalance between supply and demand totally shifts the behavior in whatever that economic situation is. And that's what's been happening in single family homes kind of progressively, right? More and more chairs are not being added despite the fact that more players are coming into the game. And increasing regulation and building code is making it much more expensive to build. So you might wonder, why is the price of starter homes going up so much? And, what happened to just, simple starter homes? Well, because there's so much regulation and there's so much building code, by the time a builder just builds the structure, they have to add things like granite countertops and tiled showers and other amenities to be able to create enough of a profit margin to even be able to build that structure in the first place. That's why when you look at housing from, say, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, we had kind of these pretty basic, simple starter homes with, reasonable square footage, very reasonable amenities. And today, even a starter home is, very nice. And there's probably many people that would enjoy getting into a starter home that, didn't even have as many amenities are out there. They just can't be found. And that's largely because of regulation and building code, which makes it so much more expensive. So then builders have to add on those amenities, just to create any sort of profit margin. And the profit margin in building is very, very low, right? It might be, say 2 or 3%, something as simple as, finishing a home in October and not selling it until, say, March could completely eat up all of the profit for that builder, for that, individual home. It is such a razor thin industry. We think that single family home supply is going to continue to get worse. There's fewer housing starts last month than since the start of the pandemic. And it just is continuing to put this pressure, right? It's like the musical chairs analogy is kind of the best one that we've come up with, but it's continuing to put this upward pressure on single family homes. It is very local, right? So the Texas Triangle has 30% of all new single family home construction in the entire country. Like, that is crazy.
Crazy.
We used to live in Oklahoma in the 2008 era, and we had many friends in Texas, and we would visit. I don't know, probably like twice a month. We were pre-children, so we did a lot more on the weekends and stuff. And Texas has always just built, right? The land is flat, regulation is relatively easy, labor is abundant, materials are abundant. We lived in Oklahoma City, where straight out of college, we both lived in brand new homes. That was just very much a norm. And we see that till today. There's the thing that you said about why Texas has had such affordability over the last many years.
Yeah. So, during the savings and loan kind of crisis, so think like circa 1980s, there were a bunch of subsidies that the government created to stimulate the creation of housing, and it worked. And it worked really well in Texas because they do everything bigger in Texas. And at one point, you could go drive the I-35 corridor, and you'd see billboards and banners that say 11 months free rent with a 1-year lease. There was such an egregious oversupply that they were desperate to collect rent in any amount whatsoever. It was devastating for developers, but it resulted in the cost of housing being depressed for decades. And it's estimated that excess supply created in the 80s in Texas wasn't consumed until the mid 2010s. And that's why housing has been just so persistently affordable in Texas. And so just think about that for a second. Between Austin, DFW, and San Antonio, and the Texas Triangle, 30% of all single-family homes in the entire country are being built. Well, yeah, they're going to have lower rents, higher vacancy, lower sales prices for single-family homes, and obviously way higher inventory. And you compare that to other markets that have a far more strict regulatory regime. Like here in Rochester, there's all sorts of regulatory measures put in place to discourage the construction of single-family homes. There's green belts that prohibit development altogether, and these are common regulatory regimes to see in those markets. Housing is radically more expensive because there's no additional supply, and it gets tougher each year.
Here's a good slide to pay attention to. Many of you own single-family homes or trying to buy single-family homes, maybe through 24, 25. You're thinking about your 26 plans, and you're wondering, why is it so hard? Why doesn't anything cash flow? Why does it seem like it's impossible to put a deal together? Well, here's the data right here.
Yeah. This is one of the most important charts to see in our time together here today to grasp this concept. So if you look back to kind of the last 15 years of investing, there was this. So the orange line is your cost of a mortgage, and the blue line is the cost to rent. And so think about this from a perspective just like a homeowner, a person who can either like rent an apartment or rent a single family home, or they can buy a house. So for most of our adult lives, almost our entire adult lives, if you were paying, $1,000 a month in rent and you went and you bought a house, it would probably reduce your like PITI, your mortgage payment a little bit. So it might be $900 a month to own a home versus $1,000 a month to rent. And fast forward to today, if you are paying $2,000 a month for rent, it might cost you $3,000 to own. And so it makes very little financial sense for someone to go from being a renter to being an owner, very little financial sense. And critically, you can look at this spread, the gap between the orange and the blue line is essentially your profit margin as a real estate investor in a single family home. And if the cost of your mortgage exceeds what you can collect in rent on that property, there is no profit.
Not including management, maintenance, CapEx, vacancy.
There is no profit. So if you feel like, gosh, I'm pulling my hair out and I can't seem to figure out how to make money buying and renting single family homes, well, you're not alone. It is a terribly unprofitable time to get into that market. And that's why we're really not buying any single family homes the way we were many years ago. This is the biggest spread ever for which we have data in the United States. And you can see it's gotten a little bit better here recently. It's unclear when this is going to change, though. It's really going to take a reduction in interest rates and an increase in supply. Supply is the answer to housing affordability. And as Elaine just said, supply is not in a good place. We are losing ground right now. We're not building enough homes just to house the people that are forming new households in the United States today. So we're actually falling behind, and a few years from now we'll be short 6 million homes instead of 5 million homes. And that musical chair game is getting worse, and so we're going to see this rent to own spread get worse, and there's no foreseeable future when it will be imminently profitable to be in the kind of SFR rental business the way it was for pretty much our entire adult life. So it's bad for real estate investors in single family homes, and it's bad for homeowners. And we love home ownership, by the way. We're helping one of our employees get a single-family home. She's imminently closing here, a 22-year-old individual who is buying an affordable home here in Rochester. We've helped like 30 tenants this year go from being a renter to be an owner. So this is something that we mourn. We very much want to see mortgages be much more affordable, and we're going to talk about that more in just a minute here.
This is a place where Nick and I, diverge a little bit, because I think you use the word like single-family homes aren't profitable, and I think that they could potentially be with some nuance. And I don't think this is an investor
Absolutely.
101, and it takes a lot of hyper local market understanding and sophistication, and quite honestly just grit to be able to handle the nerves. But if someone thinks that they can buy where they have a small amount of negative cash flow each month, but they believe that the appreciation, and that can't just be like a feeling, that needs to be based on single family home starts in that market, population growth in that market, job growth in that market, historic price trends in that market. If they believe that the appreciation not only eclipses what they're spending each month, right, because with that negative cash flow, but that it makes it worth it, single family homes can become kind of like a piggy bank, right? Like your renter is paying a lot of your expenses. You're having to contribute each month, but you own an appreciating asset, because there's no end in sight for this shortage. That is not investing 101. We did not buy our first single family home that had negative monthly cash flow until I think we owned like, I don't know. I was going to say like 40 single family homes. And at that point we're like, well, if this one is a little negative each month, well, just this one over here, kind of balances it out. That is a very advanced maneuver that requires hyper local knowledge. This is not just, go to the Southeast or go to a cheaper market in the country and buy anything. This is knowing your market, knowing your numbers really well, and having the grit and the financial reserves and the liquidity to potentially weather that. There's that hair of like a little bit of gambling there of, potentially buying for appreciation. But I think if someone is, has that knowledge and the wisdom and the ability to hold for a long time, buying something that is in demand with very limited supply could potentially be, worthwhile. Nick's absolutely right that, we at Black Swan have not acquired single family homes. I think we've acquired 5 in the last 3 years or something. But I think there's an opportunity there for a small sliver of our listeners. So take that to heart. Listen to every single word. That's not investing advice. If anything, it's a huge caution. But to say sometimes when I look at a specific deal and I understand an investor's psychology pretty well, I might say, if you're negative, $200 or $300 a month in cash flow, but you have all these other investments that are producing this passive income and you're in this market and those sorts of things, there's quite a bit of risk here. But do you feel as though you're buying something that's in high demand and low supply and can you hold for a long enough time? Again, that's a whole other masterclass that's probably outside of the scope of our state of the market. But I love it when we disagree.
Absolutely.
It makes it fun.
You're correct. I had a very simple message. Your nuanced message is more correct than mine for sure.
Here is our 2026 single family home predictions. And I'm laughing because over here in our chat, Rachel said that drum roll on the mic was 10 out of 10. So would you like to do a little drum roll here?
So this is, so we're about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through. Here's our, because we do economic predictions, single family predictions, and multifamily is next. So drum roll, please.
Single family home predictions for 2026. A mild winter gives way to a mild spring. Inventory remains low, but does increase a little bit. Mortgage rates stay flat or ease slightly. Sales volume remains steady, but way lower than 2021. We talked about how 2021 was just such a different year for housing because of the pandemic. New home starts pick up, but they remain lower than we need. That has been the headline for the last 17 years. There, a couple slides back, there was the chart that shows new single-family home starts, and you could see 2008, it just precipitous crash there. Starter home prices increased the most. Regional variation, single-family home rent growth remains muted as single-family rentals compete with massive multifamily deliveries, and few investors buy. So in many ways, pretty similar to 2025. I would say there's more sort of pent-up confusion in single family of like
100%.
why can't I put a deal together? What's happening? Am I doing something wrong? I hope that if you're listening here, you're not doing anything wrong. This is the state of the market right now, and that chart for renting versus owning, hopefully that gives you quite a bit of clarity. Let's move over to our discussion of multifamily housing.
Oh. So here's the entire multifamily market in one slide, in two photographs or two screenshots in one slide. So again, if you're doing this in podcast mode, check this out because you really have to see it to believe it. So in the top right corner here, we've got, I just searched Austin, Texas. I'm going to pick on Austin because I know it well. Gary Keller's there, Elon's there. We're there somewhat often for like Gary Keller's mastermind and stuff. We love Austin. Lots of new supply in Austin. I know at one point last year, 10% of all multifamily in the United States was being delivered in Phoenix, and Austin was right behind it. It was like 7%.
Cranes in the air, buyer beware.
Yeah, lots of cranes in the air. So here's Del Via Apartments. Looks fabulous, brand new, Class A. And if you sign a 1-year lease today, you can get 10 weeks of free rent with apartments starting at only $11.65 a month for brand new Class A in Austin, Texas. I don't have to tell you, well, maybe I do. That's very unprofitable. No one is making money in the business with that sort of proposition. And so as a result, if you look at the thing on the bottom left, you can see an apartment building going out of business. So REO means real estate owned by the lender, and the lender's attempting to sell the asset. I get one of these every day. I'm not picking on this particular community. It happened to be in my inbox.
December 10th.
December 10th at 9 o'clock when I was working on this slide deck. I'm like, oh, here's another one. I'm going to throw this one in State of the Market. So we're seeing a higher multifamily foreclosure rate than we have seen in a very long time. And this is exactly what happened. There was a bunch of supply in the Sunbelt markets, and rents crashed. And now those assets that were at premium pricing and are not generating income, they're going into foreclosure. So let's talk about rents, and this is just a mind-blowing chart. So in the top right corner, we've got Austin, Texas rents, and in the bottom left or bottom right corner, we have Rochester, Minnesota rents. And again, Austin's just a very good proxy for the Sun Belt. So as you can see, in 2022, Austin had an average rent of $1,725, and Rochester had an average rent of $1,450. That's kind of what you'd expect. Austin's kind of an expensive market,
a fancy market.
Lots of brand new Class A housing. The typical housing stock in Austin, Texas, is probably about 50 years newer than in Rochester, Minnesota, and you can see. Minnesota, Rochester's had a very consistent rent growth for several years. Meanwhile, Austin has had a significant negative rent growth to the point where the average unit in Rochester now rents for the average for a higher rent than the average unit in Austin, Texas. So Austin, average rental rate $1,450 a month. Rochester's $1,525 a month. Very, very, very hard to make money in Austin, Texas. For your sake, I hope you don't own anything that you bought in Austin in the last 5 years. If you did, you are almost certainly underwater right now. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not giving you news that you weren't aware of. But there's no business plan, no grit, no nothing can survive market dynamics this crushing. And that's something that we were really pounding the table about, many years ago, is watch out for those high supply markets. Let's look at how that's impacted multifamily sales.
I'm sorry. One thing I want to add there is, Nick and I came of age in Oklahoma City. So I moved there when I was 20 years old. Nick moved there when he was 18. Nick did undergrad there. I did graduate school and then medical school there. And Oklahoma City is very much, a boom bust town, right? Oklahoma as a whole, the whole state, lots of oil boom and bust, and the savings and loan crisis, and just so many things that, before we knew things like economic clock and seasons, and before we, even owned our own assets, let alone a private equity firm and those sorts of things. We were just steeped in this culture. Be aware of booms and busts. Like, be aware of booms and busts. Like, I knew very little about oil, gas, Oklahoma economy, but it was just like in the culture, be aware of booms and busts. And so I would add that to our seasons and our economic clock is be aware of booms and busts. There was such a boom through the Sun Belt in the early 2020s pandemic years. And the Midwest was just this boring place where very few people were investing. We always talk about this concept of a blue ocean, right? Go to the place in the ocean where there aren't other sharks and you just eat up all of the fish. And then you see that. And I think this comes from our coming of age in Oklahoma, where it was just like written into our common consciousness to avoid booms and busts. And I hope that's a takeaway for you, right? Because there will continue to be cycles, right? I hope that everyone on this call is living and investing for decades to come, and that you don't just get some interesting educational things tonight and for 2026, but you tune the way you think about the economy for decades to come. And a couple of very simple lessons kind of, put your radar on right about the economic clock, seasons, boom, bust. Look for things that are steady and predictable. Avoid things that where there's like a lot of attention drawn to something kind of out of the clear blue sky. Where that attention goes quickly, it comes away very quickly as well. That's really the story of the Sun Belt.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. Let's talk about multifamily sales.
At least once a week, someone's like, hey, what's a good market? I want to get into a hot market. And we're like, no. You do not want to get into a hot market because that market will soon be cold. That's how boom and bust works. You want the toilet paper of markets, just a consistent perennial demand. So let's look at how this has impacted sales. And this is a huge story. This is a huge story to understand. So we looked at those average per unit sale prices when we looked at our kind of economic predictions from last year. And ideally, you would buy at the bottom of the market. You'd love to buy things when they're $190,000 a unit, not when they're $250,000 a unit. And we made a prediction basically that the pricing would be determined. So this time last year, things were falling so fast and so hard that it was unclear where bottom was. Would we hit bottom? The sky was falling, and we predicted that pricing would be discovered, and that has happened. So on these charts here again, in the top right corner, we've got Austin, Texas in the bottom right. I think that's actually Minnesota, not Rochester. Yeah, I think that's Minnesota. As you can see, the entire state of Minnesota has not dissimilar sales volumes from Austin, Texas, or at least that was the case during the boom times. And now you can see how sales volumes have retreated from Austin, but not from Minnesota. Minnesota is just so much more a steady Eddie kind of market. So that's the orange bars are sales volume, and then that green line is the price per unit. So you can see price per unit in Austin peaked at $280,000 a unit back in the peak of 2021, 2022, and it's come down to about $220,000 a unit. And you can see it's been there for a while. So pricing has been determined. If you can go get a unit today for $220,000, it's probably not going to be worth $210,000 next year. Now might be a fantastic time to buy. And you can see there's been a bigger bounce in Minnesota. Minnesota has recovered way better than Austin, Texas, and that's because there's less supply in Minnesota. The oversupply problem is not nearly as pronounced. So you can see in Minnesota, we only got up to 190,000 unit or 195 or something like that. So we didn't get up to 280 a unit. So it's just in a less bubbly economy or ecosystem there. I can tell you that the numbers on every apartment building work better. Cash flow is better. It's a safer deal at $190 a door versus $280 a door. That's just the economics of it. So in Minnesota, we went from $190 down to $160. So you can see that percentage drop, it's a similar drop to Austin, Texas, though the absolute number way smaller. And so your losses that you'd potentially be contemplating are probably dramatically smaller in Minnesota than in Austin, assuming two similar deals and operators. But you can see we've already recovered in Minnesota. We've gotten back up to 170 per unit here recently. And it's kind of interesting. So look at the recovery line that's projected. This is from CoStar. So we pay a king's ransom to get access to this data. This is up to the minute. One of the most accurate commercial data resources available. So right now it seems like Minnesota might recover by, kind of 2029 or so in terms of per unit sales price. When is Austin expected to recover? I mean, it's not on the chart. Yeah, maybe 2035 or something. Yeah, it's a bleak outlook for Austin because supply is so heavy.
Let's talk about supply then.
Yeah. So it takes a couple years to build an apartment building. We had record starts from 2022 to 2023. We were shouting from the rooftops about it, that there'd be record deliveries in 2025. It would be a bad year for rent growth. We've had very few starts in 2024 because interest rates had gone up and developers, builders said, hey, might be a bad time to build an apartment building. So there were very few deliveries in 2026. I hope these are very simple, easy to understand concepts for you all, that multifamily deliveries are extremely predictable.
Why don't you quickly, and I'm going to give you 45 seconds, tell the story of our Stonehaven delivery, Stonehaven townhomes, how we pushed it.
Yeah. So we built 3 phases of townhomes, and phase 1 and 2 were 30 units, per phase. And then phase 3, we broke ground kind of like mid-year 2022. And we were shouting about how interest rates were going to go up. And we said, man, now would be a great time to lock in a low fixed rate. We'll build it through that, that hump that when rates spike. And then by the time rates come back down, that's when we'll be ready to refinance. And we were geniuses, right? And so every single multifamily developer out there did the exact same thing that we did. They literally doubled the amount of development to lock in that low interest rate before interest rates spiked up. And so we've had a record number of deliveries in 2024, 2025, and then that finally pulled back. And now we're starting to work on some additional projects, and we're actually seeing starts growing faster than expected in 2025. So we've got a couple of charts here. So these are new multifamily starts in the top chart, and then deliveries in the bottom chart. And you can see there's a 2-year lag between them. And you can see the starts in the top right corner there kind of peaking up as we go from rock bottom in 2024 to 2025. Still nowhere near the peak starts from 2022, 2023 when people were locking in those rates. But it's growing. So when there's cranes in the air, beware. We expect substantial national rent growth in 2026, but that's going to probably taper off here in 2027, 2028 as some of those deliveries start to commence from the starts that have happened in 2024, 2025. All right, let's talk about just a few operational headwinds. If you go look at our performance update webinar from, I think, Q2 of this year, Rachel could maybe throw a link into chat. We really drilled into that a lot on that particular webinar. It has been an extraordinarily challenging operational environment in the multifamily space. It's the toughest time in half a century to own and operate an apartment building. First is taxes. So during the pandemic, the central business district tax revenues collapsed. So we're seeing office super towers, urban core super towers sell for 10% of prior sales price. The tallest building in Fort Worth, Dallas, Fort Worth doing great. Tallest building in Fort Worth sold recently for 90% less than its prior peak sales value. And in Minneapolis, a building recently sold for 95% less. So it previously sold for $200 million and now just sold for $10 million. I don't really remember the exact numbers, but somewhere in that ballpark. Those used to be the main revenue source for most municipalities. So single family tax revenues are a minority of tax revenue collections. All the profit comes from office, retail, commercial, hospitality, and now multifamily is really the only thing that can pick up the bill. You can't really raise taxes on single-family homeowners because NIMBYs and just kind of squeaky wheel people show up to city council meetings, and city councils hate that, so they don't raise taxes on single-family homes. But everyone hates landlords, so let's raise the taxes on multifamily. There's no way that would impact the cost of housing, right? RDS, just one of our buildings, just one building in our portfolio. In 2024, we paid $385,000 in tax. In 2025, that went up to $420,000. 2026, that went up to $442,000. So our taxes went up by $60,000 in 2 years. And we are not alone. Lots of other people in this bucket. We personally pay about 2% of the entire tax levy of Olmsted County. So it's pretty staggering, the burden that multifamily operators need to bear right this second. Another huge headwind. There's a lot of them, but here's just a few headlines. Insurance cost increases. So on that chart on the right is real monthly insurance cost per unit. I believe this one was from Freddie Mac. dramatic escalations. There's all sorts of risk events, and then replacement cost has gone up a lot. So it could be that you get a renewal where your insurance rate quadruples, which is just unbelievably crippling as an operator. So your rents are going down, and your taxes are going up, your insurance are going up. Lofts Insurance, one of our smaller buildings. So we gave you this like big tax number. Maybe the idea of paying $500,000 in tax for just a single building is too soul crushing to contemplate. Well, one of our smaller buildings, our insurance went from $5,500 a month or $5,500 a year to $7,200 a year in just one renewal. So what is that, like a 30-40% increase or something, just in a single year? Some other headwinds here. We've got labor cost increases. So I don't know if you've hired like a plumber, electrician, HVAC tech, anything like that recently, but these are the National Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers for 2020. The average hourly rate for a contract electrician was $62 to $77 an hour. In 2025, it's $85 to $120 an hour, a 46% increase. And I can tell you, we hire a lot of HVAC technicians, a lot of HVAC technicians, electricians, and plumbers. This is an extraordinarily difficult operational burden to bear. And then material cost increases. This is hilarious to me because I had this on the slide from last year. And I remember personally buying these washing machines. They're the simplest, cheapest. I bought so many of these for our properties back when I was swinging a wrench and swinging. That's why I don't swing wrenches anymore. Swinging hammers and turning wrenches. I remember buying a ton of these things for $350 a piece. And I remember looking this up last year, and I just fell out of my chair when I saw it was advertised for a price of $650 for the exact same appliance. It's not changed one bit in all that time. These things are manufactured like 100 miles from here. Like this is not a global supply chain. This is pure inflation. And then for 2025, I went and looked back up. It went up another $20 year over year, a 91% increase. We operate 2,000 rental units, most of which have in-unit washer dryer. Do you think we buy a lot of washing machines in a year? We certainly do. And the cost of those has nearly doubled in the last 5 years. So tremendous amount of operational headwinds that multifamily operators are facing. That lowers the net operating income of the asset, lowers the value of the asset, lowers the your ability to make debt service payments and be eligible for debt when your financing matures. Certainly makes it almost impossible to deliver cash flow to your investors. It is an extraordinarily challenging operational environment out there. And there's really not a lot of optimism right now on any of these fronts. Insurance has gotten a little better lately, but it's going to keep going in the wrong direction. Labor, materials, taxes. Taxes actually probably could get significantly worse because things are just continuing to be so bad in commercial and other areas. So huge headwinds that we're facing in the multifamily space.
Let's zoom out a little bit for these next couple of slides. This is a time to, kind of perk up. Maybe you're kind of glossing over. You're like, hey, I don't hire an electrician on the daily. Like, I'll just figure out their rate when I need to hire them or those sorts of things. But these next couple of slides are really where, when Nick and I think about, like, what is the mission of our work, right? Some of our big missions are things like changing private equity, right? Removing fees and opacity and obfuscation and those sorts of things, making it a more transparent trust building industry. Things like building wealth for our investors, creating living opportunities for our residents. And one of the things that's increasingly on our heart is the housing crisis that we're in our country, and just kind of watching it just slowly build and build and build, and the pressure and the pressure and the pressure, since we started investing in 2011. When we started investing in 2011, the idea that we were in a housing crisis was like nowhere on like pretty much anyone's radar. People knew that builders had come out of the market for 2008, but we still had so much surplus housing, and just housing
there
was
were
like
too many empty houses. It was a blight.
Yeah, I mean there were foreclosures everywhere, all sorts of things. And then that really has become the story since like 2015, 2016 onward. And there's really, in our perception, just a huge misunderstanding about housing. And so we want to present to you kind of our thesis on housing and maybe how you might be able to get involved in your local area, and what all of us collectively can, maybe should consider doing for the housing crisis in our country. After government debt and AI and China, this is like somewhere in the top. This is somewhere in like Nick's top 10 of things he always wants to talk about.
This is like if you're in podcast mode, flip over, because you will not believe this chart. You have to look at this chart to believe it. This is from a really thorough academic publication the Journal of Economic Perspectives. The article is called, it's an academic paper called "The Folk Economics of Housing." Rachel, maybe you could dig up a link to it. Should be on Google there. I strongly recommend you go look at this because you might think this image is doctored. So on the right, we have people's beliefs about price effects of housing versus non-housing supply shocks. So what that means is when you have more supply of a thing, does that lower the price of the thing? And the law of supply and demand dictates that when you have more supply of a thing, the cost of that thing goes down. And that is the case in almost every circumstance.
I mean, that is like high school economics,
Yeah.
right? Like if you learn the law of supply and demand and that there's no such thing as a free lunch, like congratulations, you can graduate high school.
Yeah.
And yet somewhere between high school economics and the complexity of the market today, that has been like completely lost in common sentiment. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like we must keep things simple, right? Adding on nuances and complexity is only after first mastering the very simple fundamentals, some of the fundamentals that we talked about, economic clock, boom and bust, being a student of the seasons. In housing, it's really the story of supply and demand. Understanding supply and demand and population, if you understand those three things, everything else makes so much sense. And yet there is a real severe lack of understanding of supply and demand in our country across, demographics, ages, parts of the country, like political spectrum, you name it. There is a real lack of understanding of supply and demand. And take a look at this paper, right? Look at this data. We're sharing this data because we see it and we live it and we experience it daily. And maybe you do too. And maybe you're wondering, like, how do we get out of this housing crisis? And what is the solution? And how do we provide affordable housing? And we have to understand, we being like our whole voting population has to understand supply and demand before we can make any sense of it.
Yeah. So this chart on the right here, just as an example, new car supply chain problems. So if you ask a person if a bunch of new cars for sale are introduced to the market, would that reduce the cost, reduce the price of a used car? And only 8% of Americans would say no. And 86% of Americans would say yes. They can understand that connection between a bunch of new cars being introduced for sale and the cost of like an existing car or going down. And I hope everyone listening here, does that make sense? Maybe give me a thumbs up or something like that. Or
I mean, remember like cash for clunkers, right?
Yep.
Like in the
Yep.
post 2008 crunch when car suppliers were struggling so much and the government was thinking, okay, how do we help car manufacturers in a way that's politically sensitive? We don't just want to bail them out or give them free loans or free money. Well, they said, hey, we'll take all the clunkers off the road, right? We'll decrease all of that supply of cars on the road, and that'll encourage people to go buy new cars. Then that'll use up the inventory for the car manufacturers, and then that'll allow them to become profitable. Like, we understood that as a country, right? Mm-hmm. We understood if you take something out of the market, it brings new, and there's demand, it brings new things into the market. We do not understand that with housing.
Yeah. With, let's say that there was more plumbers trained, does that reduce the hourly rate of plumbers? So 19% of Americans would say no. They would disagree with that law of supply and demand. So almost all Americans understand that connection with cars. Fewer Americans understand it with like skilled trades. But look at housing. So 43% of Americans would say that increasing housing supply increases the cost of housing. I'm going to say that again because I still can't. 43% of Americans would say that if there are more homes available, if there are more homes that are created, that increases the cost of housing. And they might articulate it like this. They'd say, well, I heard in some webinar some people that are themselves housing providers and might be incentivized to mislead me. I've heard them say that if we build more housing, that makes housing cheaper. And yet, when I see a new luxury high-rise apartment building go up or a new luxury home subdivision go up, I feel like all it does is increase the cost to purchase a home or increase rents. And emotionally, it can feel that way. But that's not the economics of it. The only way to make housing more affordable, the only way to reduce the cost of housing is to introduce supply, which we saw play out in real time in Austin, Texas. And then here is the negative feedback loop that's really kind of killing us as a nation. Who do they blame for it? Housing providers. So the number one group that you blame are developers. And the number two group that you blame for high housing costs are landlords. Those are the only two people that can improve the problem. The metaphor, I would say, is people complain about the high cost of healthcare, and they blame doctors for that. And they say, okay, well, let's go burn down the hospitals because that's where all the cost comes from. And every time we make new doctors, well, those doctors make so much money, that's clearly increasing healthcare. So let's stop training new doctors, and then that will lower the cost of healthcare. Now, if you're a healthcare provider, you're hopefully laughing out loud about the hilarity of that. And yet those are prevalent attitudes in housing. And it's kind of terrifying to look at them play out in real time. So on the bottom there is a snippet. I got this in like 5 minutes. I was writing this, and I had two news articles like in my feed that from different sources. So the bottom one is a local newspaper, and this is just a local developer, not us, trying to get city council approval to create more housing and lower the
top one.
I'm sorry, the top one is a local developer, not us. So we should want this person to not successfully get approval because that's going to lower rents in our buildings, right? So our incentives are disaligned here. So this is just a NIMBY showing up saying, I don't see how putting up another luxury apartment building is relieving anyone's housing pressure. It doesn't feel good to this person to see new luxury housing go up. It feels to them like it makes rental rates increase. And they go to city council meetings and they call city council members. Our city council members say this is the number one issue that people block calls and appointments with them is to talk about how housing is unaffordable. And then they go lobby the government to prevent the creation of housing. Maybe this person is not well educated. That's not true, actually. This individual is a librarian, is in the business of educating our youth on things, and these are their economic beliefs that are not correct. There is no data to support this position. And you might say, well, this is just a one-off person. This person is not controlling the government. This person is successfully lobbying the government to make worse decisions, but this person's not like controlling the government. So here's another snippet. Again, this is like the same moment when I just happened to be making the slide deck. These are prevalent attitudes that are not difficult to find. So this is a sentiment from the new mayor of Miami. This is a person running one of the most important cities in the United States today. And this is what so the person who just won and beat out the incumbent said, my opponent is keen on building. She wants to put a skyscraper at every corner and then call it affordable housing, which is a misnomer because very rarely is it truly affordable. So this is a mayor who has an affordable housing policy of restricting supply that was just successfully elected. And what's that going to do? It's going to make housing significantly less affordable in Miami. So this is scary stuff. This is a negative feedback loop because all it takes is just a few noisy NIMBYs. So even if that prevalence was 20% of an incorrect perception about supply and demand and price and housing, that would be enough to probably lobby our government successfully to make counterproductive decisions. And so I don't know exactly what the solution is. Education, which is why we're sharing this with you right now. This is really scary to us. And if you if you disagree with this or you have questions about it, please throw it into chat or whatever. We'd love to chat about that here at the end. The only solution to housing affordability is supply. There is no other way, or reducing our population, but I don't think that's a great idea. And so we have to have policies that facilitate the creation of supply. It's truly that simple, and it is increasingly prevalent for people to believe that supply and demand does not apply to housing, which encourages governments to make decisions that restrict housing, and then that makes housing less affordable, and people blame developers for that, who then exit the business, which makes housing even less affordable.
Yeah.
All right.
On that happy note.
I hope this is like an important concept for you to hear.
This is so important, right? Like you can find these things in your local area, read that paper from that journal, think through these things. We really think of this as like apolitical, right? We take out Republican, Democrat, city, state, whatever. Like this is economics 101. This is what we all, should have learned in high school. If you want the thing to be less expensive, you need to make more of the thing. It's true for widgets, restaurants, healthcare, housing, cars, clothing, simple makeup, like everything, right? Make more of the thing, and that decreases the value of the thing. As Nick said, we're probably not going to change demand, right? Our population is unlikely to decrease, so we have to make more of the thing. And I hope you take this to heart and you think about how it impacts your market, how it impacts, ways that you might, choose to get involved either with your city council or encouraging zoning or development or, voting or all of those sorts of things. We're not encouraging you to vote in any, one way. Things are so nuanced, but understanding supply and demand and changing common sentiment around the idea that if we build more housing, it will be less affordable. If we don't fix this crisis in the next, 10 to 15 years in our country, like right now we're in like a lot of pressure and, families and even whole generations are kind of being stunted in their development. But if this continues on for another 15 or 20 years, it will completely disrupt like the whole social fabric, right? Right now, it's like a pretty strong annoyance. Soon, this will be a huge threat to national security and to the continuation of our nation.
If there's 10 people playing musical chairs and there used to be 15 chairs, now there's 12, and in the next few years there will be 11, then 10, and pretty soon there will be 9. And when we get to 9 musical chairs, that's when you have some really, really disruptive social change that's very counterproductive.
Let's share our 2026 multifamily predictions. We're getting pretty close to the end of our presentation.
Yeah. So the freezing, brutal winter continues to thaw. People are going to start talking about spring. But here's the thing. We won't know that spring has arrived until it's too late to plan. I'll say that again. We won't know when spring has arrived until it's too late to plan. We hope that you listen to this and you understand that spring is here, or spring is just around the corner, and now is the time to plant. Now is the time to invest in a multifamily property or with a syndicate or private equity fund or whatever. If you're wanting to get in the real estate game, man, this year it's the best year in a long time to do it. Some headwinds in the single family space, but you can absolutely make it happen in single family as well. Spring arrives quietly. Each day is a little bit warmer, a little bit brighter. Sales volume slowly increases. It's going to remain lower than our peak in 2021, 2022. This is like a critical piece. Prices are clearly at bottom, and they have nowhere to go but up. That's a strong statement, and it is like you want to buy when the market's at bottom. Market is clearly at bottom right now. We see one more year of big regional disparity with the Sun Belt struggling and the Midwest doing well. Deliveries are going to slow down, but then maybe pick back up in the following year. But the deliveries are going to slow down for sure for 2026 because 2 years ago, we started building a lot fewer of them, which means the rent decline is going to slow down in the Sun Belt, and rents are probably going to remain flat nationwide, but we're going to see rents turn around nationwide. We're going to see the people who ate their seed through the winter, they've got nothing to plant. And what we mean by that is the people that wasted their money during the past few years that lost capital, they won't be able to invest at this uniquely, exceptionally favorable time to buy. Like, it's likely that 2025 will have been one of the best years to buy in our lifetime, and 2026 could be much the same. But if you lost all your chips and you don't have a seat at the table, in the last couple of years, you're stuck. You're in a tough spot. This process is slow and quiet. No one shouts from the rooftop, "Hey, I lost all my money in this real estate deal." And so many assets right now are so far underwater. The old expression, if you owe someone a little bit of money, you have a problem. If you owe someone a lot of money, they have a problem. That applies here. And so we're seeing lenders kind of just extend loan maturities and, extend and pretend you might have heard. It's going to take many years before kind of all the fallout from this, pretty much everyone who bought in Austin, in the last 5 years is upside down. Like, that's just how it is. And you saw, tens of billions of dollars of transactions. How does that ultimately resolve? It's going to take time. It's going to be slow. It's going to be quiet. There's going to be some additional capital calls out there, but not many. LPs are out of cash. They're out of time. They're out of they're checked out, and they're not going to answer those capital calls. And so we're going to see some of those kind of quietly just go away. So those are our predictions for the 2026 multifamily market. A phenomenal time to buy multifamily real estate, an absolutely phenomenal time.
I think it's important to talk about rescue capital. So rescue capital has been kind of the big thing of the last, 18, 24 months of like, oh, there's this deal and it's pref equity and it pays a, fixed rate and all of these things. That is not the Secure Freedom Fund. We have an entirely different model. rescue capital comes in when the GP themselves can't summon a capital call, so they bring in another layer to the capital stack. And I like what you say here. Rescue capital shape shifts from angels into sharks. Rescue capital can look like this like panacea of, oh, it's a fixed, stable investment for the new investors. And the old investors are assured that new liquidity is coming in. And thank God you weren't the one that had to do the capital call, and all is well. And let's just give it a couple of years. And it just has never made sense to us. There's just not enough runway with enough speed to have enough profitability to service out the returns to the rescue capital, returning the rescue capital, servicing out any sort of returns to the original investors, returning their capital. And then, in these complicated capital stacks, there's often mezzanine debt and debt funds and you name it. And we have been, exceptionally pessimistic for rescue capital deals, really ever since they came out. And I think we're going to see that over the coming years, where, the original GPs say, hey, the rescue capital kind of helped us for a couple of years. It bought us a little more, time, but now our loan is due, or, there's just not enough capital to go around. And the original LPs will likely be completely wiped out. And I think even a lot of the LPs in the rescue capital will be wiped out as well, because the rates were just so high, right? To be able to overcome that earning inertia there. I think that's going to be a story quite a bit of 26 and 27.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what we're doing. So that's kind of our, state of the market for 2025, comparing to our 2024 predictions, giving our 2026 predictions, and then let's see what we are doing, with our portfolio. We had a phenomenal year in 2025. We raised about $35 million in the Secure Freedom Fund, fixed rate offering. It is not rescue capital. It solely owns the assets that are held in that fund, and it offers a fixed rate of return to investors so that they can have clarity and certainty and structure in a time where there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. So it's really meeting the psychological needs of our investors. And we bought a lot. We bought about $100 million. So we closed on Northern Place, Boulder Ridge, Meadow Park, Rainbow Plaza, Northern Hills. It's a big year when like the same name is coming up. There was a time this spring when we had Meadow Park and Rainbow Plaza both under contract, and I felt like we were like the Care Bears or Teletubbies or something, because it was just so fun to say we're under contract on Meadow Park and Rainbow Plaza. We also bought our office building that we're standing in, and then we are imminently closing on Villages at Essex Park, the largest acquisition in the history of the company, $40.4 million. A little bit stalled because of the government shutdown. There's a HUD loan assumption. Everyone cross your fingers that we can get this thing across the finish line. And by we, I mean HUD across the finish line. We at Black Swan are prepared to close on December 30th, which is the second worst day that you could possibly close a multifamily transaction in the year, the worst day being December 31st. But we want to close it in this tax year. And so we're willing to deal with any operational headache and, calling in our staff. And that's literally why Brian is here in town. He's one of our remote workers, and he's in Rochester to, help shepherd us through that closing. Big year, about $100 million, because we have capital, because we're liquid, because we have the trust of our investors, because we're willing to buy while everyone else is just kind of mopping up the messes from the deals that they put together through the pandemic when it was springtime and it looked like everything would just be easy forever, and they were making pretty risky decisions with variable rate debt and those sorts of things. We just stayed slow and steady and got fixed rate debt and things that allowed us to weather the 2022, 2023 storm really well. And then 2025, has been a really good year. So what are we thinking about as we go into 2026? Protecting what we have. That has been a huge theme forever, but particularly since 2023. We have always been huge proponents of vertical integration so that we can be, directly linked to our marketing, our leasing team, approving the people who ultimately live in our housing, controlling costs with maintenance and lawn and snow. Like all of these things are so that we can protect the portfolio that we have. Warming our friends by the fire. So doing things like this, sharing our education, sharing our expertise, you can then take it and do what you want with it, right? Contemplate, talk to the people who are important in your life as you're making investment decisions. But we love, sharing. My personal theme for 2025 was life-giving Elaine. I was hoping we would have our last baby. That happened. I'm going to have her in 2026. And I built my coaching program, Freedom and Legacy Blueprint, built that in 24, really expanded it in 2025, looking, an amazing year coming up for 2026 of helping people to see the simplicity in the midst of all of this chaos so that we can all build wealth. We can all build security and financial freedom. That's what makes this so fun for us. Right now, we're not buying a lot of single family. I think some people, probably think that we've quote unquote graduated from single family, or it's not worth our time these days, or those sorts of things. And that's not it. We love single family, and we love that it's different than multifamily. They're like cousin assets to each other, but the numbers just don't make sense right now. And so we're even thinking about opportunistically selling some of our single family homes, which, for those of you that have been around us for a long time, that's a bit of a crazy thing for us to say. In our market, regulation is so intense with rental inspections and requiring certain things on landscaping. And I mean, you name it. There are just so many expenses because of the regulation, and single family home prices in our market are quite high. And so we're potentially thinking about, that's not a declaration, but we're potentially thinking about selling some of our single family homes as rates come down in 2026. Financing is a huge part of a real estate portfolio. We have always said the deal plus the debt together is what creates the magic. So we spend a lot of time on financing. 2026 is going to be a big financing year for us. A lot of our long-term fixed rate debt, we're going to have the opportunity to refinance it. We have been so shielded from refinance risk over the last couple of years. I think we did refinances of, $1 million.
Yeah, $1 million
in 2025.
$450 million portfolio.
Yeah. I remember saying to Nick, why don't we just write a check? What are we doing? He's like, no, we're going to refinance it just for the sake of it. I'm like, okay.
We got $20,000 on cash out refi on that particular deal, which is the thing is we still have some deals at 3.0% fixed rate that's allowed us to deliver cash flow at a time when no one else can deliver cash flow. Cash flow is actually going to get tighter because we're going from 3% to 6% or something like that. We aren't going to have to do cash in refis, but some properties we will absolutely get cash out. So we are so grateful that we got that long-term fixed rate debt at a time when other people were getting variable rate debt. And this is a huge change of the season for 2026. We are crazy excited to finally be able to do some financing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would not be surprised if we acquire somewhere between 100 and 150 million in 2026, and then have refinance events on another 100 million, so somewhere between, my prediction today might be between, 200 and 250 million of some type of financing activity, right? Whether that's a new acquisition or a refinance. So that's going to be a considerable place where we put our focus in the coming year. And by our focus, I mean Nick's. Let's be honest.
We're still getting that long-term fixed rate debt, by the way, on
we
all
love
that.
It's the Midwesterners in us, right?
Yes.
Just the slow, steady, Eddie, conservative decisions. And then leveraging the team. We talk a lot about vertical integration. We grew our workforce from 51 to 61, so about a 20% increase in our workforce year over year. Protecting what we have is, becoming more and more of a focus of ours, I would say, from 2023 onward. This year, we spent a lot of effort on insurance, and Nick was even sharing a big potential win that he has for another round of insurance wins coming up. Insurance is expensive, and it's just plain hard to get, even in the Midwest, right? Even where we don't have hurricanes and tornadoes and some of the other things, just the insurers have to get money from somewhere to be able to take care of all of those claims and all of the underwriting and everything. So we've been successful in reducing our insurance costs on one asset from $254,000 down to $121,000, on another from $88,000 to $47,000, on another halving it from $121,000 to $62,000, and then thinking about what other costs can we work on. You've heard us talk a lot about lawn and snow. You could go back to our performance updates from 2023. That was the year that we kind of halted all acquisitions and instead just focused like crazy on bringing in-house maintenance, in-house lawn, in-house snow, in-house cleaning, even like basic, landscaping, minor tree trimming, bushes, those sorts of things. And that's led to a 60% reduction in lawn costs, 50% reduction in snow costs, and 30% reduction in flooring costs at a time when all of these costs are just, going up left and right? When you Google the price of an Amana washing machine, it's gone up 91% in the last 5 years, you must be thinking about cost control or you will just slowly get eaten alive, right? You could have the best deal that you put together on, say a single family home in 2021, you bought it at a steal of a deal, you have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, super low rate, maybe you've got some good rents, and if your costs are just running away, you can just slowly get eaten alive. So you must be thinking about protecting what you have.
Lots of good questions coming in. Go ahead and throw those in chat. We can get to those here in just a little bit. So some other things that we've done, we upgraded to higher materials with some marginal cost deltas, and that's just kind of ruthlessly, constantly seeking out higher quality products, especially if we try to diversify our supply chains to those onshore. Getting our flooring from a mill in Georgia, getting many of our components from Mexico. I actually just met with a wholesaler this week where literally all they do is they procure shipping containers full of materials for multifamily operators. Portfolio-wide efficiency. So if you came to Real Estate Real Life, and this was on VIP Day, you'll remember the Black Swan toilet. There's that festooned toilet there. This is the Niagara Stealth toilet. We're installing that throughout the portfolio, and we can save somewhere between, depending on how old or bad the existing toilet is, 10 to 90% of the water that toilet uses. In one property alone, just at Northern Place, we saved 37% year over year on water. So we've got our utility overwatch sheet there. We were at $59 per unit per month on water. And our most recent bill from November 2025, we were down from $59 to $37 per unit per month. Optimizing our facilities and cleaning costs, I think we brought that down like 30% year over year. Staggering improvement. Working to vertically integrate advertising, so you can see in the bottom right a chart of our leads that we generate each week, and that orange line at the top is our line for 2025. We are generating a whole lot more leads, and Sophie is the person working on that, having really good analytics and vertically integrating our lead generation. So we're doing far more organic lead generation and paying for leads a lot less to outside vendors. We're vertically integrating legal and accounting. We've significantly reduced the cost and scope of our engagements with those service providers, saved probably 50% year over year on those costs. We have I would say about 100 different initiatives in flight right now for various cost saving measures. It is a constant drumbeat, and it's how we stay alive. That's defense. On the offense side, even though rent growth is flat nationwide, rent growth is 2% here in Rochester. It's not bad at all. But here's rent growth for just a sample of some of our portfolios here. Staggering rent growth. So you look at like Northern Place, for example. It's a great data point because this asset is exactly a single year old. So at acquisition, our average in-place rental rate was just under $800 a month. And our average in-place rental rate today, 1 year later, is $1,050 per month. A staggering climb. We actually kept a ton of tenants in place with that transition as well. And we still have not rolled out internet. So we will crest $1,100 a month per unit per month here within the next 60 days. So just doing everything we can, doing our part. We are buying at the right time in the right season. But we have to do our part, especially with our legacy portfolio. We bought assets in 2022, and the market has had a huge downward inflection since then. And we've needed to double profitability to be prepared for when the interest rate on those assets doubles here in this coming year. We are exceptionally prepared for it, and this is how we've done our part. So that's what we're doing. Believe what we do, not what we say. Just another way to think about this here. What might you want to avoid? So spring is right around the corner. You have to believe that. You have to believe that in your soul. You're going to see a lot of media, social media, news media, whatever, saying that things are bad. Well, those sources of information, they're not evil. They're there to make money, and they do that by attracting you, and they typically do that by startling you with some surprise bad news, and then keeping you riveted with that bad news. Don't believe that. Know that the people who love you and care about you and want the best for you, they're telling you, like, spring is here, and now is the time to take massive, decisive action. You aren't going to do anything if you're trapped in a place of fear. Don't go pencils down. That might sound very sophisticated and defensive. No. You should be looking at as many deals as you can. That's how you know when spring has arrived, is when the deals that didn't work, all of a sudden they start working. We were evaluating new construction deals for years, and none of them penciled in. We just kept we just kept trying. And then one day they started working. Costs came down a little bit. Some things improved. Interest rates got better. We got a little bit better each time and reduced our, prospective construction cost per unit. And all of a sudden the numbers work. Spring is here. Real estate assets, avoid urban core, retail, and office.
We've been saying for years.
We've been saying that for a while. That advice still stands. This office building we're standing in right now, it was cheaper for us to buy this office building than it was to lease it. That's a heck of a place in the marketplace right now. We're probably at bottom on suburban retail and office. We're in a suburban location right now, so we think we bought at bottom on this particular asset. I'd say it's kind of a poor outlook for commodities like gold and precious metals right now. They're at a peak. China's buying them like crazy, and that could be a tailwind there. But oil is probably down. Maybe we're at a bottom for oil and gas. Might be a decent time to invest in oil and gas production. I don't know if I'd necessarily invest in the commodities, but the production may not be a bad idea. We're at kind of a peak for the stock market. It sure feels like the Magnificent Seven are driving more than 90% of all gains in the stock market right now. So all it takes is kind of one bad shareholder call with NVIDIA, and a significant portion of the stock market could be wiped out. It's truly the case. And then finally, with from a debt perspective, rates are coming down. Lenders are finally wanting to lend. You just have to stay in touch with them, know what's going on. You need to be ready to take massive action on the lending front. If you've got a deal that you have struggled to refinance in the past, you have to stay heads up. You have to stay engaged. You have to stay in the game. We have lenders reaching out to us for the first time in years saying, hey, do you guys want to finance something? That's a big deal. That's a really big deal, because for a long time, it wasn't even a question of, well, how bad is the interest rate? Like, we couldn't get debt at all. Like, there's very few lenders that were lending. That situation is changing, and now is probably a bad time to lock in fixed rate debt indexed to prime or Fed rate, because it's probably going to come down a little bit here in the near future. You might want to get something that's indexed to Treasury rate, and I would avoid prepayment penalties if at all possible. Try to negotiate those out, because there's a good chance you're going to want to refi that debt. There's a good chance that spring is right around the corner. Spring is here, and you are going to be in a great spot on that debt, and you could be in an even better spot if you have some refinance options and you're not hamstrung by a prepayment penalty.
The story on debt is always just put in the time, put in the reps. People will ask, how do I get debt on anything from a single family home, a short-term rental, multifamily, small, large, you name it. And I just say, call a lot of banks. Okay, What else do I do? Just keep calling the banks. just keep make a list of the small banks, the regional banks, the large banks, and just keep calling them. And a no is not always a no. We've had banks that have said no for a while, and then they call and say, you know what, we had a bunch of debt that was paid off that we weren't expecting, so now we have a bunch of money to lend. We've had banks say, you're too small for us. Okay, now you're big enough. We've had banks say, you're growing too fast. Okay, now your growth has slowed down. We've had banks say, our current board is a little conservative, and then they get a couple new board members and their loan committee changes. It really is, just so relationship based. You've got to be working on debt. You must work on debt at least as much as you work on the deal. It's a little more amorphous, right? Because it's not like it's easy to, kind of go out and look at a house or go out and look at an apartment building. Debt is making the calls, having the emails, having the Zoom appointments, meeting with bankers face to face. It's a lot more just relationship building until there's some breakthroughs. But it's so important in being able to put together good deals, and then being able to do so and shielding yourself from risk. One of the questions that came in was, with your long-term fixed rate debt, is that with commercial loans? How do you manage to get long-term fixed rate debt with commercial loans? So at this point, everything in our portfolio, even all of our single family homes, it's all commercial lending. There was a time when we were building our own single family home portfolio that we had a lot of conventional loans, but over the years we've refinanced them. So long-term in commercial lending is usually 5 years. A small portion of our loans, we were able to negotiate a 5-year term, and then at the 5-year term there was a reprice that was already signed into the promissory notes. Usually we were able to get in a reprice of, say, no more than 2%. So no matter what happened with interest rates, our rate on that loan could go up no more than 2% for another 5 years. So we would have 10 years total to work with. 5 years is typical. Shorter terms in commercial lending are out there. A lot of people did like 1 or even 3 year debt in 2021, 2022. We always felt like that was just so risky, kind of the longer runway you have to work with. And we would work really hard on avoiding prepayment penalties so that if we wanted to refinance at year 2, 3, 4, we were able to, but we had 5 and sometimes even 10 years to work with, which just gives you more of the economic cycle, right? If you think about any given economic cycle, it's about 7 to 8 years long. If you can lock in fixed rate debt for about 5 years of that cycle, you're protected through a lot of it. And then you can choose to opportunistically do a refinance sooner than that if you negotiate either favorable or no prepayment penalties, but you don't have to. And that's really the big difference there. So great question there about debt. Let's talk about things that you might potentially plan. So again, just another reminder that we don't give investing advice. You can think of this as an educational, informational, just fun time for us to be together. Talk to the people who are important to you, your CPA, your attorney, your financial advisor, before making any investment decision. We've just shared what we're doing with our portfolio. And then here's some things that you might consider as you're thinking about your 2026 investing plan.
Yeah. So we believe that now is the time to go all in. If you've got cash deploy, if you've got dry powder, if you've got your seed that you stored through the winter, now is the time to plant. There is a insane buying opportunity in multifamily right now. Multifamily is doing better than single family and is often steeply discounted if you can find the right deal. Now, just because you're buying multifamily doesn't mean that it's discounted. You have to go work your heart out and have connections and stuff to find the good deal. But the good deals are out there, whereas a few years ago there weren't any good deals. They were very few and far between. Now's a great time to invest with a multifamily, syndication or fund if you trust the operator and they aren't drowning in their old deals. Like, do they have a track record? Have they been around for a while? Have they ever lost investor capital? Have they had investor capital calls? And like that, now is a fantastic time to invest with those type of operators.
I'll say one thing I want to add there. Kind of how I would say we've been very kind of pessimistic toward rescue capital. Is a thing in the industry that really irks me right now is people who are like multifamily. Oh no, actually hotels. Like that should
car washes.
That should be very alarming to you. That is not to say that you have to have a portfolio that is 100% just one asset class, or that good operators can't take their operational excellence from one asset class to another. It should just be a thing that makes you slow down and say, is this because your multifamily is doing so well that you're taking this operational excellence and providing a little diversification and going to, maybe a more naive market where you can bring this operational excellence? Or is this because your multifamily is struggling and you're trying to hide it or just run to kind of the next thing? There are so many respected people in our industry that when you look at their, sort of the thing that they're beating the drum on over the last, 5 to 7 years, it's like, well, first do A. No, actually B. No, wait, C is the best. Oh, I actually figured it out. D is the best thing to do. That should make you say, if something is successful, it generally is successful over, a pretty long period of time, right? Like, and you get better and better at it over the years. You don't just come in, like master something in 9 to 12 months and then go on to the next asset class. So that's something I would be thinking about when I'm thinking about, kind of risk in the market. Again, not saying that those deals can't be successful and that good operators can't share other things from other asset classes. It should just cause you to slow down.
Absolutely. On the single family front, all single family homes, you can make money investing in single family homes, but there's just more of a headwind because there's that gap between rent and mortgage. And Burr in particular is really tough because it is possible to make money flipping right now. And, as long as you don't
Good luck finding an electrician.
Good luck finding an electrician.
And a washing machine.
And a washing machine. But man, Burr is tough right now, which pains me to say because, gosh, that's what got us to where we are today is doing one SFR after another, renovating distressed, blighted homes in our community. I'm so proud of that work. But there's a lot of headwinds on the numbers right now. STR, short-term rental, is a very kind of market-specific thing. So we're seeing a huge correction in a lot of markets. If you're in the Smokies, if you're in Destin, Florida, if you're in Lawton, Oklahoma, or something like that, I'm not thinking Broken Bow.
Broken Bow.
Yeah, Broken Bow near Lawton. Those are areas where we've seen huge corrections. People losing 50% of market value, so they're hopelessly upside down. Other markets are doing perennially well. We've exited our STR line of business. We ran an experiment when we had some like surplus vacancy in our portfolio just to give it a try, and we made money when we had 1. We had money when we had 10, and by the time we got to 50, it was just so high touch, and the juice was not worth the squeeze. But there's tons of people that are making money with STRs in our market, and it's doing just fine. You might be required to do something like this if your market is a vacation market and has high property values. Like if SCR is the only way that gets you into owning a hard asset backed by paper debt, do it. And target mature markets that have a stable regulation where it's unlikely your business is going to be disrupted by regulation. As rates regulate, it might be a good time to sell that SCR or a long-term SFR investment. As it stands today, it's very unlikely you'll be able to get a very favorable cash-out refinance on it because rates are so high, and like prices are pretty high. So you could probably get decent money for it, especially as rates start to moderate. Prices will go up long before you can get like hyper favorable cash-out refi proceeds. Might be a good time to do a build for sale. Be really careful with that. Any new construction is always just intrinsically far more risky than doing anything kind of redeveloping an existing asset. It's always a good time for, well, I shouldn't say that. It's right now is a good time for fixed rate debt. We thought it was a great time for fixed rate debt.
I would say it's always a good time for fixed rate debt if there's no prepayment penalty.
Absolutely. Prepayment penalty is a huge piece of that calculus. We think rates are going to go down, but we're still getting fixed rate debt because you know what? They might go up. And man, our pro forma sure looks better with variable rate debt. If we just assume rates are lower in the future, we're geniuses today. Awesome. But the fixed rate debt is safer. And thank God we got all that fixed rate debt through the pandemic, or we would be facing some extraordinary headwinds. We have been facing headwinds, but that's one headwind that we did not get hit by as many other operators did. And then finally, don't freeze a loan. If you hang out in the common consciousness, if you do what everyone else does, you're going to get what everyone else got, and it's not much. It's probably not something that's going to realize your potential as a human. You will become the average of the people you spend the most amount of time with. And so you have the ability to pick that tribe, find a tribe of people that believe that we live in spring, whatever that means to you, like that understand the gratitude, the debt of responsibility and ownership we have to this incredible gift that we've been given to be alive at this time, in this place, in this season. It is an amazing time to be just a human alive in the United States, to be a real estate investor, to own and operate a single family home, to live in, to invest in. Spring is just around the corner, if not here already. And you have to get around people that believe that if you are going to survive and thrive. So a lot of our advice is timeless here. These few bullet points. Find your asymmetric advantage, the thing that you are uniquely good at, that an advantage that you have that other people don't. Real estate is hyper local, and the season is the same, but your climate might be just a little bit different. Riches are in the niches. We are niched down to kind of like B class multifamily in Rochester, Minnesota. We're real good at that one thing, and we don't do a lot else. We vertically integrate, and we're always testing things like short-term rentals, but we know where we excel and we know what our asymmetric advantage is, and it's in that niche. Fortunes are made by fixing market inefficiencies, whether you're Airbnb or Uber or Warren Buffett, and you just need to find an inefficiency in the marketplace where you can buy something for a little bit less than you know it's worth, whatever that might be for you. Maybe you're buying, I was just at the gym, maybe you're buying exercise equipment, secondhand exercise equipment. That's probably an extraordinarily inefficient market. I bet you could make some decent money buying and selling used exercise equipment. I prefer buying and selling just buying used apartment buildings, but same concept, a few more zeros.
And real estate is a very inefficient market. I remember when Nick and I were doing single family homes, and there's just so much inefficiency, right? People are rushing to sell. They're making emotional decisions. Maybe they inherited a home, or they're moving across the country for a job, or they got a divorce, or they're having a baby and they want to upsize right away. I mean, you name it. There's just so many inefficiencies. And we kind of thought, man, maybe when we get to like multifamily, right? Maybe when we're in like millions, it would be, a little more sane. People would be, more educated, more rational. Nope, that wasn't true. Well, maybe when we're in like tens of millions, right? Maybe that's where we'll find the sane actors, and it'll get harder and harder because the market will become more and more efficient, right? These people are educated and they've got the same data that we have and the modeling and, access to basically the same types of capital. Nope, that's still not true. We have yet to find, a level in the market that is not inefficient. It's really just about understanding the market and figuring out where you can uniquely add value. I don't believe that you can just throw a dart and buy a building or a house or anything, I'm going to go to a cheap market, or I'm going to go here because it's landlord friendly, or to this hot market or whatever, and do well. I do not think that that's true. I think you can buy in a market that you know really well, where you have an asymmetric advantage, where you can provide value to solve a market inefficiency. And if you just do that over and over and over again, you will be rewarded for that. Opportunity cost is always your greatest cost. I remember, when I first, learned this next statement that I'm going to say, I probably learned it, maybe about 10 years ago. And at the time, it was just a completely life-altering concept. In any given year, the progress that we make is not just for that year, it's for the last year of our life, right? It's because the growth from that year compounds. And let's even just take like a working career to make it a little bit easier to wrap our heads around. Let's say you're going to work for another 20 years. The skills that you learn in 2026, yes, they help you in 2026, but really how they really help you is in your 20th year, when you've compounded and compounded and compounded and built upon what you learned in 2026. You will be completely different 20 years from now than if you have no growth in 2026. That was life-changing for me. And it has, in a very positive, uplifting way, like really put the pressure on me of like every year has to be about growth. And I'm not just talking about like numerical growth and portfolio size. I'm talking about expertise and experience and a sense of gestalt about a market and unconscious competence and, being able to walk into a deal and look around and say, this is it. That is the greatest benefit that you can have. And if you wait out a time, if you go pencils down, you lose that experience, and that opportunity cost is always your greatest cost. That doesn't always mean that you're making moves or that you're making the same moves or at the same pace. As I said before, when like prices were really high, we really said, we're not going to be the people that compete on price, but we are going to be the people that compete on terms. Now things have changed a little bit. So your tactics change, but the overall strategy should generally stay the same, year to year to year. Understand those seasons, understand the economic clock, and most importantly, understand that the person that you become through your investing is so much more important and valuable. And that's where like the real dividends are. And then the financial piece is just a reflection of that. So to kind of, summarize all of this, right? This is the same. We are going to be saying this in 2036, 2046, 2056. Solve a hard problem, add massive value, take immediate action. If you just do those three things over and over and over and over again, you will be rewarded for that. You will be rewarded for that in the person that you become, in the skills that you develop, and you will see it reflected financially. If you want to connect with us, you can do so at blackswanteam.com/connect. You can sign up for our newsletter, our YouTube channel, follow us on socials, block a time on one of our calendars. I think Nick might have a little more availability through the year. I'll be back in action
next year.
Yeah.
We're buying a $40 million apartment building here in 14 days. So my calendar is blocked for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think mine is too. If you really need us, you know how to reach us through Rachel, those sorts of things. But you can block a time on our calendar in January and beyond just to talk with us, get to know us, tell us about your investing goals, hear a little bit about the Secure Freedom Fund. We love talking to people. We find that to be, the most rewarding thing that we get to do. So there's lots of ways for you to connect with us at blackswanteam.com/connect. We have a couple of questions that
Only
came
2
through.
hours, 40 minutes in. I mean, most everyone's still here. I am so happy for y'all. This is.
I'm blown
There's
away.
not a lot of people who can hang for 2.5+ hours, and those are the people that get all of the reward. Yeah. Like the people that can just show up. That's all of life right there.
Yeah. A couple questions came in back when we were talking about insurance. Are you still with State Farm, or did you find another company? So the bulk of our portfolio is still insured with State Farm. The slide said insurance is becoming more expensive if you can find it at all. And what we're seeing with State Farm is their underwriting is becoming more and more challenging. They have caps on the total asset size that they will insure. They have caps on the age, and I think it's only 30 years.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's not like, oh, we're not going to insure things that are 100 years old. Like 30 years is not that old.
95.
So some of those things we have to insure with other carriers. We're buying larger assets, some of our older things. So we still love State Farm. We find them to be, they provide us with excellent service. But it's been harder to keep our entire portfolio there. And I think there will be a time in, we're already kind of say this a little bit, but I need to work out the phrasing. It's like the deal plus the debt plus the ability to insure it. That's your magic. Because if you can't insure it, then you can't get a loan on it. If you can't get a loan on it, you probably can't buy it. And if you hold it in cash, it's probably better to just put your money in the stock market. So that insurance piece, we talked about the housing crisis, right? Like our country must figure out the insurance piece. Homeowners need to be able to have insurance. Multifamily buildings need to be insured because lenders won't lend if the lender's not protected, and kind of the whole thing could crumble if the insurance situation doesn't work itself out. And then finally, we had a question on what do you think about investing in RV parks?
Yeah, so a very good friend of mine has had extraordinary success investing in RV parks. Had a very successful exit kind of at the peak of the market. It's something that I would say have to have a passion for. It's a completely different asset class than multifamily. It's going to be way higher touch. It's typically seasonal. It's dominated by mom and pops. The lending is outrageously difficult to get. Very relationship based lending. There's lots of lending outlets for multifamily, and there's very few for RV parks. Extraordinarily common to have a seller financing, contract for deed. You may or may not partner with kind of a national franchise brand like KOA. And it's just like anything, like you really need to scale it for it to truly be successful. So you have to plan to go acquire a large number of RV parks in a certain region where you're going to, you have to staff the heck out of these things for high season depending on how you operate it. To be a good RV park these days, and again, this is a RV park, not a mobile home park. So you're serving guests that are in and out every day that demand amenities. You've probably got a swimming pool.
It's like the arms race in laundromats, right?
Yeah.
It used to just be like, is there a washer and a dryer? And maybe there's a speed queen, but now there needs to be like arcade games and high-speed Wi-Fi and vending machines, or even coffee cart,
laser tag. Yeah. So
laser tag at the laundromat.
I would say that investing in an RV park has far more in common with running a restaurant than it does with multifamily real estate. Like we got out of short-term rental because it was 100 times more touch than multifamily. And there's probably some triple net commercial person who would say, well, Nick and Elaine are, wasting their time with the high touch industry of multifamily. So it's all a spectrum, but that's why we don't personally invest in RV parks at this time. But I have one of my best friends of my entire life is a very successful investor in RV parks, did outrageously well with it. But it is definitely not for beginners, and you have to be an operator. You have to be a person who loves hiring and managing staff and problems and stuff like that to do RV parks.
Yeah, good questions. Thank you guys so much for all of the gratitude and appreciation.
Well, someone said, what do you think about investing in new construction in 2026?
I'm just going in order of the comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were skipping it.
No. We'll do the question. Let's get to the question, and then I'll do my gratitude piece. Thoughts on investing in new construction multifamily projects in 2026?
So we are pro investing in multifamily new construction projects in 2026. We're hoping to break ground on other projects in 2026. It's not a sure thing by any means. Probably not a great idea to do one in Austin, Texas right now, or one of those other high growth markets where you're already facing, steep rent concessions and vacancy and other headwinds. But if you're in a low supply market, where you have solid rent growth, now might be a great time. Interest rates are coming down, and construction loans are typically indexed to more of like a Fed rate than Treasury rates. We're seeing contractors and subcontractors a little more hungry for work than they used to be. Material costs have kind of leveled out. all the dials on the dashboard point to 2026 being a pretty good year to break ground on new
The
construction right
washing
now.
machine only went up $20.
Well, that's the thing is if 2020 was a good year and then you went into like 2024 with expectations of 2020 washing machine prices, you're going to have a bad day. You're going to have a real bad day. But the washing machine only went up $20 year over year. And that's pretty much what we're seeing is we can build an apartment building in 2026 for about the same cost as an apartment building in 2024, 2025. And now the lending cost is radically lower. And the threat of new supply to compete with you and force you into a concessions arms race has kind of gone away. So right this second, I mean, 2028 is shaping up to be a good year to deliver a multifamily community. It's hyper local. But we're trying to build a new project here to break ground in 2026 and
Trying to get some land.
Yeah, we're trying to get some land. Got some plans. Just met with the city for a long time last week, and yeah,
Fun. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here and being part of our State of the Market and being part of our investor community. If you've invested with us, it means so much to us. Happy holidays, whatever the end of the year is bringing for you. We hope that it brings you a time of reflection. I think a fun thing to do is scroll through your phone camera. And, I think we all experience this where we're just like surprised of like, wow, I can't believe that happened. Oh, and that happened. I was starting to think through that myself as I'm preparing for a Freedom and Legacy call tomorrow where we're doing a year-end reflection. Like, for example, I do a kindergarten trip with whatever child is going into kindergarten that year where it's just me and that child. And I took our son Micah to Disneyland, and that was just in August. And that seems like light years away. But that was in 2025. And so it can be fun to go through your camera reel and just reflect on the goodness that you've experienced. The big things, the small things, the meals, the sunsets, whatever it is, just take a moment to reflect. And we wish you abundance and prosperity in 2026. Very soon, we will be setting our date for our next quarterly performance webinar. That'll be in probably the 3rd or the 4th week of January after we let those books and everything settle for Q4. Then we'll put together our Q4 2025/year-end performance update. You know how to reach us if you need anything in the meantime, and we hope you all have a great night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.